I'm here to debate anyone who wants to debate me on the topic of that tweet I made about. Let me take a look at this base tweet I made. It was a very, very base tweet. And what I've noticed is that whenever you're based on Twitter, the goons just come after you. You know, you just get surrounded and just like attacked by all these goons, and they just come after you. You know. So yeah, that's what happened, and well, I want to settle things. If people think my tweet was so ridiculous, so crazy, I want to have a debate about it and settle it.
Yo, can you hear me?
Yo, Rev. Yeah, I can hear you now. I can hear you. Perfect. You were like ratioing all of them, like individually, all the people who replied. You were like ratioing them.
Someone said that, bro. What happened to smash the state machinery? Why do you want small businesses? I mean, like, it makes no fucking sense what they're even saying, dude. They think smashing the state means you smash fucking businesses and shit too. They're so fucking stupid.
That's literally the dumbest thing ever. I mean, like, if you look at any like socialist country in history, they've always united with the popular petite bourgeoisie. They've always united with what Lenin called the democratic petite bourgeoisie, not just in peasant economies, right? But even in, the People's Republic of China, they're literally cutting taxes for small businesses right now. Like, I posted an article just a second ago showing that China is cutting the income tax for small businesses. Like, the most powerful communist country in the world is literally doing that.
That's what I told someone. I was like, bro, wait when you find out what China does.
It's so stupid. The DPRK doesn't even have income tax. Do they? Like, because we've been lied to and duped by fakes like AOC for this entire like generation, I guess, of people coming up. They think that socialism means it's when you tax everyone and you punish everyone for making money. That's not what socialism is. Socialism is about just taxing people. If anything, it's the opposite. Socialists always reduce taxes because when you nationalize alternative way of generating revenue, right? Like the DPRK, it gets a lot of its revenue from its nationalized industries, not from taxing people. That's stupid. Here's the problem we have in America today, as far as like the production of goods go. So we have kind of like the opposite problem of what the USSR had. The USSR had the problem of not being able to produce consumer goods, like secondary, like light goods, in a way that was competitive with America. We have the opposite problem where now we're having a struggle to produce primary goods, right? Like we have all these, like we have baby powder shortages and stuff like that. So we need to nationalize some of these primary industries and reduce the cost of the products for primary goods so that it's easier to get necessary goods. Now, when it comes to other kinds of products, like more light consumer products, I think we should do the opposite, right? We should have less regulation, less taxation, and create a thriving, growing market. Communism is not about stifling the forces of production to force some kind of flat equality. Communism is about unleashing the forces of production. It's all these leftists that attack me for that agenda. They're all Malthusians. They are all Malthusians. They're all degrowth Malthusians. The communist agenda, first and foremost, is about unleashing the forces of production and generating so much wealth. Not that you have to tax the rich, but that the old ruling class becomes outmoded by the new forms of wealth that's being generated. And I mean, that's literally what's happening in China right now, too.
We're in base. Bring him on.
Okay, perfect.
Gang right here. But yeah, this dude was like, what about what Marx said about smash the state? Dude, that doesn't, dude, they think the ready state machinery is like you adopt the industry that already exists. That's
let me tell,
like Marx is talking about a political change, not fucking blowing up industry. Like, that's some fucking anarchist primitive shit.
That's really, yeah, it's really brain dead. It's really brain dead. And also in the context of America, when we talk of smashing the state machinery, the state machinery that needs to be smashed is really the deep state machinery, right? It's the imperialist state machinery. It's the military-industrial complex. It's the CIA and these intelligence organizations. It's the media. Even the media needs to be smashed. The current mainstream media that exists. It's these kinds of institutional powers, these extra democratic institutional powers that need to be smashed. I mean, it's not. See, and also when it comes to the state, they have this kind of antagonistic view towards the Constitution, right? I'm not saying the Constitution is perfect. I'm not saying that, but the Constitution is one of the only things that actually unifies Americans as Americans. It's probably one of the most, even on a cultural level, probably the most important document in the entirety of American history. You can't just get rid of the Constitution. You get rid of the Constitution, you get rid of America. There's no segment of Americans that will support an agenda to get rid of the Constitution. If anything, it's the opposite. Like Ingalls said, we must wield the Constitution against the bourgeoisie, which is going against the Constitution. When they say that corporations have free speech, that's blatantly, obviously against the point of the constitutional right to free speech. When they have all these big public institutions, these social media institutions, right, which are public in practice, but private but formally speaking, they're private. They just exist as a way to circumvent our free speech. The bourgeoisie is not defending the Constitution. They are breaking down and tearing apart our constitutional rights. And as a communist, we must defend these basic constitutional rights. And not just that, we should take the Constitution even further, like FDR wanted to do an economic Bill of Rights. The Constitution for the communists is not only a negative document, but also a positive document. And so when I say we must defend the Constitution, I also speak of this kind of FDR-style economic Bill of Rights amendments that can be added to the Constitution. Leftists have absolutely no understanding of American politics. They have no understanding of politics in general. For them, it's all phrase mongering because they heard AOC say this phrase, or they heard the DSA say this, then this becomes the reality for them for socialism. It's crazy too because they attack me saying that my position is no different from the DSA, right? But in reality, in practice, their entire position is based upon dogmas that was spread by the DSA and by BreadTube. This entire the rich was popularized by the DSA, by BreadTube, and by the Squad. And so they attack me based upon positions that were popularized by the DSA and then calling me a democratic socialist or a social democrat. In what sense am I a democratic socialist? There's not any democratic socialist in the world or in America that would support lowering taxes across income groups. No democratic socialist would support that. There's no democratic socialist that really supports reindustrialization of the economy, because for me, reindustrialization of the economy doesn't just mean green industries. No, it means big people's fracking for oil. I believe in oil and I believe in nuclear energy. That's part of what reindustrialization will mean. It will mean oil and nuclear energy. Is there any DSA person who believes in that? They think that just because you have reasonable and moderate ideas, this means you're a social democrat or you're a democratic socialist. Because for them, all they think about is ideology. They think in terms of ideology, and they think in terms of the left-right paradigm, where if you're far left and you're real radical, you believe in those crazy radical ideas about abolishing the family and the state and destroying the Constitution. No, I don't believe in all of that stupid silliness. The entire left-right distinction in America is based upon these ideological memes that have basically been spread through the media and through social media. It has no real basis in reality. Before left-right distinctions can even have a basis in reality, we have to establish a new communist center. A new communist center. That's what I think the Communist Party must represent. Not even just the Communist Party, but even the People's Party. It must represent a new people's center. And from that new center, can there be left-wing and right-wing divisions from the basis of that new center? And if you don't get this, if you think this is not revolutionary, you're just stupid. Think about how much trouble the Medicare for All movement could cause, and how crazy that had people going on CNN. If someone as moderate as Bernie could drive people in the media that crazy and could drive the establishment that crazy, then imagine what my agenda would do. Imagine the kind of fear they would have if this agenda was able to become popular and able to actually be wielded by brave, real political partisans who actually represent the people and who are not going to sell out to Joe Biden and the Democrats. Imagine if this agenda was wielded by a strong communist party. It would completely overturn the establishment. They would go crazy over it. They would go completely crazy over it. It's precisely because these ideas are moderate and reasonable and realistic that they have so much power. The way in which you reveal to the people how rotten the Constitution is not when you demand something that's crazy and and the establishment refuses to give it. It's when you demand something that even by the establishment's own logic is reasonable, and then they still come into contradiction with themselves by refusing it. This is the way you awaken the people to how rotten the establishment is. It's by making them come into contradiction with their own baseline, their own logic for what is and isn't reasonable. That's how you reveal them for the fakes and spooks they are. I mean, look at the way Jimmy Dore's forced to vote revealed AOC. It was literally by using her own policy, right? Medicare for all, against her. He took it even further than she did. He took her logic even further than she did. And it was through that process that she was revealed to be a sellout. It wasn't these far so-called MLs who are far left or these anarchists who were able to expose AOC. No, it was Jimmy Dore. It was Jimmy Dore, someone who would be considered very moderate. So these people, they have no idea. They have no idea what they're talking about. No idea what they're talking about whatsoever. And part of this tweet actually was the nationalization of primary industries and the cutting of taxes. This was in part inspired by an idea that Logo presented. I think it was based on Michael Hudson, which is basically that the best economy, or what we need for the economy, it's cheaper goods, not necessarily higher wages, but cheaper goods. And I mean, when we have an economy like this that's so inflated, I think the truth of that kind of speaks for itself. Cheaper primary goods. Cheaper primary goods then mixed with a thriving light economy would be so powerful. It would be so powerful. And I mean, that's basically what most socialist countries do. First, they master the production of these primary goods. And then the second stage, which is what China has also achieved, is they produce a thriving light economy. Thriving market, which is at the same time subordinated to these higher 5-year, social plans that the Communist Party has. So that's kind of the underlying logic of this lower taxes, nationalized primary industries thing. I mean, it's entirely consistent with what socialist countries historically have done.
You notice that all the leftoids that speak out against infrared's like mass political line, every single one of them, somehow they are politically or ideologically congruent with the World Economic Forum's agenda.
Yeah, completely. What they think is socialism is literally just a Great Reset. That's their idea of what socialism is. It just means Klaus Schwab, Great Reset, World Economic Forum. It's literally just that. This kind of reminds me of the controversy yesterday about money, right, and about exchange value. I was arguing with this annoying guy. He's really stupid, but somehow I doubt he's going to show up here to debate me, right? Because oftentimes they're scared, and when they're not scared, they just come on here and embarrass themselves. But he was arguing that basically money has always had its value based purely in politics, right? So this kind of like MMT type logic, right? Where the commodity has no meaning. It's completely, and it was and that would be one thing, right? That would be one thing. That was just his theory, but he was arguing this as the Marxist theory, right? As the theory that is standard or default for Marxists. But when you actually look at the writings of Karl Marx, you'll see that the entire basis for exchange value is that money functions as a universal commodity, meaning that money also is rooted in abstract human labor. It's commodity money. It's not just fiat money. This distinction between commodity money and fiat money is literally it's probably the most important distinction in modern economics. The end of the gold standard was probably the most important financial and economic transformation in modern world history. I mean,
also you could use historical examples, like if the value of currency is only politically enforced, then why did Mussolini fall? Why did Hitler's Germany fall? You know what I mean? Yeah. Because the reason why they were able to sustain their currencies and their economies was through military expansion, and that military expansion was only promoted through political expediency.
Exactly.
And they still fell.
That's a very good point. But also, I think sometimes these arguments they use are just almost self-evidently stupid. Like there's a really easy way to debunk what he's saying. Historically, money has been a commodity. Usually, it's been gold or silver, right? To get gold or silver, you have to mine. Its value is actually rooted in the labor time and the difficulty and so on that it takes to actually produce this money. It was actually a commodity that takes labor. It was not just based in politics. That's just historically untrue. And in the rare cases where it was not a commodity, it was almost always linked to commodities. And there's only a few rare examples throughout history, like the Yuan dynasty. But generally speaking, money has always been a commodity or it's been linked to commodities. And Marx himself even says in the 3rd chapter of Capital that the value of paper money only exists insofar as it's linked to gold. He says that verbatim. He says the value of paper money only exists insofar as it's linked to gold. So this idea that there's no distinction between fiat money and commodity money is just completely ridiculous. The money that Marx was talking about, as far as the abolition of money goes, was commodity money. And commodity money was abolished. It was abolished. And ironically, the ironic thing is it was abolished by the establishment itself. It was abolished by the establishment, right? I mean, the most held currency in the world is the American dollar, and that's the basis for American imperialism. Is the fact that it is the universal reserve currency, and because of this, America is able to borrow endlessly and can fund its military expenditures and its crazy military spending based upon this debt. Imperialism since 1971 has been based in the dollar. It's been based in the dollar, and it's been based in America's ability to take on debt. But no leftist ever speaks about this. No leftist actually has a knowledge of 20th century and 21st century economics or political. Actually wants to challenge the currently existing establishment because they don't even understand what the establishment is. They don't even know what Bretton Woods is. They don't. They don't know how after the end of World War II, America and Britain set up these global financial institutions, and through these global financial institutions have ruled the world. They don't even know how imperialism functions. They don't know on an institutional, financial, economic, and political level how American unipolarity functions. I've even had someone tell me that American unipolarity isn't a real thing, it's just a buzzword. I've literally had leftists tell me it's a buzzword. They're so uneducated. They don't understand Marx's work. They don't understand classical economics. They don't understand the economics of classical imperialism, like Lenin and Hobson and so on, and those people. And they especially don't understand 21st century economics. They're completely economically, historically, and politically illiterate. They are.
They have no foundation to even begin to start criticizing what they're looking at in the present because they haven't even reconciled the past.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I feel like most leftists, most of the kind of errors that leftists make are literally the same errors that have been made in the past by left-wing groups and like pre-Soviet, Tsarist Russia. I mean, literally most of these deviations can be, it's like, okay, yeah, this has been tried before and it failed. This has been tried before and it failed. They have no understanding of history. They have no understanding of history whatsoever. Their view, I wonder I feel like if they actually had to soberly come to terms with the reality of the Bolshevik Revolution, or the way the Communist Party of China rose to power, or really the reality of any communist country in the world, ideologically, they would just be completely destroyed. Even spiritually, they would feel sickened because for them, I think these communist countries for them are just like Candy Mountain, I don't know, they're just like Candy Mountain utopias or something. It makes no sense whatsoever. They have this Puritan complex where their view of history is that either something is completely pure and pristine and flawless, right? Or on the other hand, it's sinful, it's wrong, and because it's sinful and it's wrong, it's completely cursed and it must be completely thrown away. They don't actually have a real view of history. They don't understand how sometimes the good arises from the bad. They have no understanding. They have no dialectical understanding of history. They have no understanding of historical materialism whatsoever. The left in America it's not only spiritually and culturally decadent, they also, on a theoretical level, don't even understand they don't even understand the theories of the people that they preach. They don't even. I read a good tweet. They're dogmatic, but they don't even understand the dogmas of what they're dogmatic for, and that's the worst kind of dogmatic person.
Well, you reminded me.
I was gonna mention.
You reminded me of when Grayson said in the patriotic socialism video. He said, many modern day leftists, they make the mistake of thinking that the good is real, but reality or like reconciliation is finding the good within the real. Right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, right, like a big part of what you're saying is that like the lack of understanding of dialectics, it's like really shooting like the modern like American left in the foot. You know, they think all communist movements before were static. There was no development when it comes to theory or ideas or whatever, and we can just copy and paste that within the American context, right? And not understanding how dialectics obviously forms a big part of the theory, but also is integral to the application of the theory within the United States. It's like because of this, that's why the CPUSA is just like a dead party, you know?
Yeah, and you know the thing is, it wouldn't be so bad if they just had a kind of undialectical and static view of history where they kind of in an unwise way just applied things that were true in different socialist contexts to America. That would be wrong. But what's so bad is like they're dogmatic, right? But they don't even understand their dogmas. So it's like even from a dogmatic, like kind of a very dogmatic Marxist standpoint, they don't even understand what they're talking about. Even from this standpoint, they don't actually understand the history of the USSR. They don't actually understand the works of Marx and Engels. They don't actually understand the history of the People's Republic of China or the Communist Party of China. Their entire on these things that became popular in America, either on the internet or just like in real life, like workers' ownership of the means of production and just these kinds of things. And so when you say something that would not be even scandalous in another country, right, like cutting taxes for small business, they just go completely crazy. Meanwhile, the biggest communist country in the world is literally doing that exact thing, that exact same thing that they're saying is so crazy for a communist to say.
I was going to mention, right, like adding on to what you said about just the lack of knowledge of dogma. It's like they call us, revisionists, and they say, they provide a more faithful interpretation of Mao and Lenin and Stalin, right? But then when we point out, like objectively, right, Mao says George Washington was a revolutionary, right? Lenin tells, workers in the United States to be patriotic. They outright just say, well, yeah, Mao was stupid, or yeah, Lenin was stupid, and they completely just like when the proof is in the pudding, they throw the pudding away. I guess that's the best way to say it.
Yeah, I've heard usually what will happen is when they say something that completely contradicts Marxist Leninist theory and they're presented with overwhelming evidence of this, they'll just say, oh, we have to do historical materialism, which means we actually just have to reject whatever Marx said about this because Marx didn't know that there were slaves in America. It's like they just say the most ridiculous stuff. It's like Mao didn't know that there were slaves. It's like, you don't think he knew that? You actually don't think he knew that? The guy who studied George Washington's military theory in depth throughout his entire life didn't know that didn't know that there was slavery at the time. They just and what they do is like in place of they say they're doing historical materialism, but in reality they are actually literally the revisionist. They are the revisionists. It's one thing to disagree with Marx, but it's another thing to disagree with Marx when you don't even know what Marx's position is, right? If you're going to say Marx was wrong about something, you have to actually know what Marx meant and the underlying basis of what Marx was saying and the point of view he was coming from. And then you have to show from a Marxist standpoint why your position is even more Marxist than Marx's position was himself. So, for example, I guess you can say the Bolsheviks kind of did this in practice, right? Proving that revolution was possible in a country like Russia before it was possible in the more developed countries. In a way, they turned Marx on his head, right? But these leftists aren't doing this. They're just actually not acquainted with the Marxist position. They're acquainted instead with whatever nonsense they were fed by the CIA social media complex that has completely ruined their brains and has been since the 60s dedicated towards funding anti-communist leftism. And I think that this like goes a lot deeper than we think. Like it's obvious that they fund people like BreadTube, right, to spread anti-communist propaganda. But on the other hand, I'm starting to think they also fund a lot of these MLs and these other people. I saw this meme. It's like they're a Trojan horse, really. They fund these fake MLs as a Trojan horse. I think all of this comes downstream from a social media complex that is designed and engineered by social scientists, by intelligence operatives, in allegiance with the actual media itself to create false perceptions about communism, both in anti-communist ways and even in pro-communist ways, all across the board. This entire social media world, it's created to stop the possibility of a real people's uprising. That's the only reason why it exists. And that's why when we come on the scene on the internet, suddenly everyone hates us. Suddenly we're attacked by everyone. Suddenly it's like we say we're just the most evil, ridiculous, crazy people who've ever existed on the internet ever. We literally get more hatred than literal fascists get. We get more hatred than literal fascists get. For what? Why? Am I the first person to suggest lower taxes? I'm not. I'm not the first person to suggest that. I'm not the first communist to suggest that. As I said before, the DPRK literally got rid of income tax. So it's like this completely reasonable stuff you say. I honestly think the internet is designed to destroy populism. The internet is designed to destroy real people's movements.
I was going to say that you can see the evidence of this while you can't like directly correlate it to like this is obviously Fed shit. I think you can like connect the dots, but just think of like some of the infrared community's response to that image of the Starbucks employee in a fursuit. And I think that all this stuff is purposely orchestrated and designed so as to create this outward appearance or this aesthetic, this disgusting aesthetic that makes it so that workers have to believe that like communism isn't for them. Like it alienates them and isolates them and like makes them feel revolted or disgusted. They really want what they really want is for workers, the overall majority of people in America that are like normal, to be fucking disgusted with communism, with any type of like real communist movement, by saying like, yeah, communism is furries and weirdos and blue-haired people with nose rings that have never worked like a hard labor job in their life. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the Starbucks unionization has set socialism, communism, etc. back in America like more than it's like. Here's the problem. Like leftists think in terms of economics when it comes to political struggle. They think in terms of individual union struggle against the boss for economic gains at that specific place. But what actually trumps that is the political struggle, the struggle for political hegemony. This isn't just true now. It was even true in Lenin's time. You know, what is to be done was written to say that it's actually not the economic struggle with the boss of your workplace, which is primary. It's actually the more generalized political struggle, and that raising the consciousness of the working class would be going from this economic struggle to the political struggle. And today we have a similar problem where all these leftists focus on the economic struggle with the boss. And so they see, okay, these workers unionized, and so it doesn't matter what, their aesthetics. But their aesthetics is actually everything, because the political struggle is what's primary, and this sets the political struggle back infinitely. I mean, for communists to be associated with, furries and stuff like this, it's the worst possible thing. It makes us look like deranged, crazy freaks. And that's why I'm happy to take endless hate from the left for condemning and denouncing that degenerate union leader. Because
I was going to say that was a perfect point, pointing out that like political hegemony is the primary goal, because like the reason why we unions had such a strong prominence in America in the first place was because the involvement of CPUSA and other like socialist movements in the past. And the reason why those political organizations supported those unions and supported labor struggle wasn't wasn't just to like get better benefits in those specific workplaces, like you said. It was because by supporting those laborers and workers, they were able to gain like better political influence, and they were showing that they were capable of helping people. Like they were showing that they had the chops to exert political authority on behalf of the people. You have to prove to the people that you are capable and you're willing to help them if you're going to win. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's the whole point. That's the whole point. That's also why you should, if you're going to be involved with unions, it has to be through the institution of a political party or of some kind of working class organization. Otherwise, it's just individual and basically meaningless. For you to individually support unionization, it means absolutely nothing. It has to be through the institution of a political party, right? Because the whole point is gaining political hegemony. The whole point is building the party of the working class and overthrowing the establishment and replacing the bourgeois establishment with the proletarian establishment, right? That's the whole point, is to build the new communist establishment, which represents the working class and the people, the masses more generally. Politics is everything. It's all about politics. I mean, it's like I said, most of these controversies that exist on the left, they've already been played out historically in Russia and China. And a lot of this stuff is like, if you just have a common knowledge of history, you'll know that these positions are stupid. Like this obsession with unions, it's just stupid. And it has no reflection upon the actual ways in which the Bolsheviks, for example, participated in unions. I mean, Lenin had a whole political internal struggle against the other communists, right, within the Social Democratic Party. That was, originally a Social Democratic Party, over this question of economic versus political, right? That's the whole distinction was over individual economic struggles and more general political struggles. And if you actually look at how the Bolshevik, not the Bolshevik Revolution, but the even the February Revolution happened, and also the 1905 Revolution, is that before both of them, there was an increase in political strikes, not in economic strikes, but political strikes started to become more and more predominant over economic strikes. And this is what led to the revolution in 1905 and eventually the revolutions in 1917. It was the accentuation of these political antagonisms. The economic struggle is only a basis for raising consciousness for the higher political struggle. I can't believe there's no one here who wants to debate me. I mean, so many people on Twitter just went all out over this post that I made, and there's no one here who wants to debate me. It's pitiful. It's absolutely pitiful.
No, we gotta get better at baiting. We gotta get better at baiting.
No, the baiting's fine. I mean, if you look at that post, like it had 50 quote tweets, but where are they now? Where are they now? I've even responded to
Ain't nobody want no smoke. They don't want no smoke. They don't want it.
They don't. I think I'm gonna go down the list of the crow tweets, and I'm gonna ask them to debate me until we get someone who wants to debate me. There has to be someone.
No, I don't think they will. These are Fabians. These are literal Fabians. Like, these are people who are gonna hit and run, and like the last thing that we always compare, or I don't know, I remember back in the early days of Infrared, I don't know about so much. I mean, he still is Hannibal, but Haz is like Hannibal, okay? Like, he likes direct contact. He wants to fight, and he wants to have real fights. These guys don't want to have real fights. They just want to have their little piss matches and, slap you and run away.
All right, Zolo, I gotta be honest, Zolo, I appreciate the support, but you do have an anime profile picture.
That is true.
I don't know, man. Who gave you speaker? Who approved your speakership? There's only a limited number.
I don't know.
I think we're gonna let me see if we can revoke that.
Let's see if we can revoke.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. Anyway. Moving past that. I'm gonna see if I can invite this guy to debate me. I'm literally going down my list of quote tweets and just asking people to debate me.
I must say, Zolo, hello. You do talk a lot of shit, not gonna lie. you know, if you want to talk shit about me, at least at me, you know. I'm just saying. You know?
Listen. I think Zolo is probably an alright guy. It's just
It's sad.
I don't know.
Dude,
It's
it's not even the anime thing. It's just like, dude, why are you subtweeting me? You know, it's like,
is he actually quote tweeting you?
No, he's like subtweeting me. He's just like talking shit or whatever, but like screenshotting my shit and now tagging me. It's like, dude, you
I hate it when I get screenshotted instead of quoted because it's hard to respond.
Yeah, it's I mean, Zolo, you know, just say it to my face, all right?
I mean, it's a little bit too late now.
I mean, yeah, I
Got
guess.
fucking booted.
Yeah, honestly, I just feel like it's kind of a little bit of a waste of you know, we only have like 10 speaker spots. You know what I mean? We only have 10. There's only so many.
Man, let's get some people that want to.
Yeah, we need to get some people who want to debate, but there's no one to call me. I've actually been asking people.
Whenever I host with like August and Rev, I always say we need some scumfuck bastards. We need some shitlords. We need some absolute fuckheads to come in here and say some dumb shit in front of us.
Oh, it's gonna happen inevitably. The thing is, like, if you take their most serious like hater of infrared, it's gonna be a clown inevitably. It's always like that. It's almost always like that. I mean,
gonna be.
If you watch Haz's debates, it's always like that. It's always like some weird person. They usually look weird as well. They sound weird, and they have
no weird too.
Yeah. Usually all of the above.
That reminds me of like after he finished debating Tank and things finally calmed down. He looked at the camera and he's like, "Why do I get these people, man? Like, what the fuck is wrong with these people?"
Oh my god, the tank debate was legendary though. That was legendary. That was legendary.
You're a white dude. You're a white dude warping as an Arab.
That's literally the funniest debate. That's on the
internet. That shit was gasoline.
I'm surprised it doesn't have more views.
It should get way more views.
Yeah, it's really
actually all the infrared
like,
videos.
Why are people afraid to just speak their mind? You know, it's like we're gonna take you seriously. You just gotta like speak with your chest out. You know, like
keep it a stack. You know,
I almost never start with any personal insults. They almost always insult me first. Because I like staying on the content of the debate. I prefer that because on the content of the debate, I will completely win, unquestionably.
When they actually get pressed on, like, when you actually press them on the shit that they claim to believe in, they don't actually believe in this shit. It's like when I went into their space and they said they talked so much shit. They called me a white chauvinist. They called me a bunch of fucking names. They called me like slurs and shit. And
wait, you had to? Like, they called you a white chauvinist?
No, me, Voidborn.
Aren't you literally indigenous?
I'm technically indigenous, yeah.
Aren't you supposed to be
indigenous.
aren't you supposed to be like the most like important identity to them? And they call you a white chauvinist.
I'm supposed to
like the subject.
Yeah, I'm supposed to be their I'm supposed to be their subject of aristocratic acclaim, yeah. Dude, when Haas said that on stream, when he said that what they want is to turn indigenous Americans into aristocratic class to subjugate over like the common people, that shit's true. Like, it's happening. Like, it's actually the cultural perversion. Like, that shit's happening. Like, they try to convince people to act like that. It's fucked up. Like, that shit's really happening.
Yeah, if you actually look at the way in which they promote elitism today, the irony of it is that they always promote elitism through some of the most marginalized groups, right? It's such a weird kind of like irony or dichotomy that goes on. They promote their like kind of aristocratic aesthetic and elitism. It's always through the veneer of some kind of marginalized group, because it's only actually through like the veneer of a marginalized group that they can actually justify these kinds of insane things that they're doing. Like when they try to bring the English crown here, it's gonna be through land back and 1619 project and like all this kind of stuff. All this is gonna be through the woke agenda that they try to bring back the British monarchy in America. It's the most evil dialectic there is.
Yeah. Yeah, and it'll be like the revival of the British monarchy onto the American colony with a fascist government. Yeah, that's what they want.
That is the kind of post woke reconciliation that they want. I think Haas made a really good point in one of the last streams he was having, where he talked about how, you know, every cultural revolution ends with a kind of a new center or a new reconciliation. This new reconciliation that they want, I think, will be a kind of like fusion of like some of this woke stuff, but in a more kind of like technocratic, neo-feudal or like neo-monarchist veneer, where all constitutional rights will be stripped away and so on. And I think before this happens, there's going to be some kind of major political crisis that opens up the floodgates, per se, for this to happen. I think we have a really dark future ahead of us for the next decade or so. This entire political climate we have right now, where you have these extreme leftists and these like crazy, insane woke leftists, and then on the other hand, you have MAGA and so on. I don't think it can just. It's going to have some kind of reconciliation, and likely it's not going to be immediately with the the supremacy of a People's Party or a Communist Party. It's likely first going to be a kind of a reconciliation with a new kind of monarchy of some sort. I think they really do want to strip away all our Republican and Democratic rights.
I was gonna say that, like, just to jump off of your point, like the stuff I'm about to say is more anecdotal, but like there's been an uptick in crime, like in my area, and right after like the increase in gas prices, like gas is like almost $5 a gallon. Like a gallon of milk went from, I remember 2 years ago it was like $2.69, and now it's like almost $4 a gallon. There's like rent is going up everywhere, but also in my area, and things are getting weird where I live. And I literally told one of my family members, I was like, you know, keep an eye on this stuff, because the higher the prices get and the less that money can buy, the more desperate people get, and the more desperate people get, the more weird things are going to get around here. And 100%. And I think that like something I keep asking like other RTS, like whenever we VC and RTSG or whatever, I always wonder like how much of it, because obviously like these crises are being opportunistically utilized by like the Davos agenda, the Democratic Party, and those ilk in order to facilitate the conditions that would bring people to a mindset where they'd be more open to accepting this. It's like how Christopher Hedges said, you're seeing a situation where people might begin to clamor for their own enslavement, right? But I was wondering like how much of it is planned, like how much of it is purposeful neglect or purposeful deployment of special operations, and how much of it like is just the chaos of reality. And in fact, it may be a bit of both at once, right? It may be that they expect the chaos of reality to happen to just make things worse. But I said to some people at CPI, I said, they're going to take advantage of these domestic financial crises in order to like market fascism to the American people. When people are most desperate and hungry and starving and hurt, that's when they're going to be like, we have a way out. That's when they market 1619. That's when they market the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset. When as soon as they feel like they can unveil the product to a desperate people.
Yeah, I think you're entirely right. And the way I think about it is like this. So on a more objective level, there are certain transformations in the mode of production and in economic realities that can't really be resisted or changed, right? And then on the other level, you have the way in which the political structure is going to respond to this. And so I think the Great Reset is meant to be a way of like getting ahead of this kind of objective social crisis that is arising in America due to its own internal contradictions. It's meant to get ahead of that and kind of get ahead of the transformations in the mode of production. But the problem is that I think, even though to an extent this stuff is planned, I think this stuff is planned in a way. I think the problem is that the actual movement of reality will inevitably go beyond what the elites are able to plan for, and what they're actually able to give proper form to. And so, in a sense, they're kind of playing with a kind of madness. But I think this madness will unleash itself in a way that also eventually outmodes the elites themselves. It's like what Haas says. It's not necessarily that we're anti-Great Reset. We have our own communist Great Reset agenda that goes beyond theirs, because it's the negation of the negation, right? We have our own people's Great Reset, because this transformation in the forces of production, that's inevitable. The question is, what political form will it take? Will it take the form of the British monarchy? Will it take the form that's dictated by the existing American deep state and imperialist machinery? Or will it take the form of an objective movement that is giving political and subjective expression to by a party that represents the proletariat, a party that represents the American working class, a party that represents the great American masses? And so we are competing with the elites over who can actually give political expression to this objective revolution in the forces of production, which is now causing a kind of a crisis, or even a kind of like year zero. But the great beauty of this, and the reason why it's so important that we are aligned with the American masses in doing this, is that it's actually through this revolution in the forces of production that the American values and traditions and ways of life that are held sacred and have defined the people who live here can be reconstituted on a new basis. I mean, the Bolsheviks encountered a similar problem, right? In Russia, there was an objective process of industrialization and modernization that was occurring. The elites, tried to, get their hands in this and to industrialize and to work with the and to have their own banks and to also work with the bankers of France and England, which was more modernized. They even had their own Stolypin land reform agenda. But ultimately, the elites actually failed to properly lead the people through this revolution in the forces of production. And it was only the Bolsheviks who were able to lead the people through this process and this abyss and this apocalypse of modernity and of industrialization, and was able to do so in a way that reconstituted the Russian way of life and the Russian Dasein, right? The Russian being. The Bolsheviks were able to give a new form to the Russian ethos and the Russian logos. I mean, it was the same Bolsheviks, right, that got rid of the Orthodox Church, which had been corrupted at the time, and revived it, right? It was Stalin who brought the church back. And so there's this kind of irony where it's only the communists who, on the one hand, can completely lead the people through this revolution in the forces of production. And on the other hand, through doing this, they can also do the exact opposite, which is reconstituting the traditions and ways of life of the masses and of the people. That's why the only way to be a true conservative is to be a communist. The only way to be a true traditionalist is through the future, is through the unleashing of the forces of production. So my response to the Davos Great Reset agenda is that we want to unleash the forces of production even further than they can. We want to go even farther beyond what they can do, because they themselves don't actually have the ability to lead the people through this revolution in the forces of production. They don't actually have the ability to address the social crisis, which is objectively occurring and which they also have had their own hand in creating. They don't. That's my belief, and that's my wager, that it's only the Communist Party that can actually do this. Another thing, just want to say, I've noticed there's still no one to debate me. There's no one requesting speakership. Is there really no one who wants to debate me?
They're scared.
It's ridiculous. I get all this hatred on Twitter. I make a tweet, right? I'm not even bothering anyone. I'm not quote tweeting anyone. I just make my own tweet talking about what I think the agenda for the CPUSA should be. Now, most people are not even concerned about the CPUSA. If it wasn't for infrared, most people probably wouldn't even know what the CPUSA is, right? But you just get all this hate for it, and then none of them actually want to stand behind their words with their voice, with their actual flesh. None of them actually have the courage to do this. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. They don't
either
have
that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Either that, or they're all bots that are being like handled by like a bunch of Indian dudes in a computer room.
Dude, I believe I have encountered bots before. I remember there was this one time. It was when I made the tweet with the Kublai Khan picture, talking about saying that like Afro-Asiatic traits, right, was patriarchal and honorable and all these other things. And then I had this one guy who was like replying to me, but I replied to his reply, right? And he didn't even know that I was like the original creator of the thread. It's like there's some weird stuff that happens. I think there really are a lot of bots on Twitter. I mean, there was that reveal recently that like half of Biden's followers are bots. So that's like millions of people. I mean, that's like millions of bots out there. And if it's like if half of his followers are bots, what about AOC's followers? How many of those are bots, right? Because I do think you'll find that most of these bots are probably like liberal, left-leaning bots as far as bots go, right? So yeah, there probably are some bots who are responding to me, and all it really takes is a small percentage of humans to that the bots are creating for that to influence social perception. People are very greatly affected by social perception and social engineering. All right, I'm going to ask another guy to debate me. Let's see if he replies. If you look through like my tweet history, if you look through like my tweet and replies history, you'll see just a list of me telling people to debate me, and no one joining here to actually debate me. It's absolutely insane. It's absolutely insane. I came on here. The only reason why I even made this space tonight is because I wanted to settle once and for all. I wanted to settle things with everyone who disagreed with me. Because if someone attacks me and wants to go to war with me, I say, okay, let's settle it. Let's actually have a debate about it. But none of them actually have the courage to come here and debate me. I mean, how long have I had this space up? Probably for like nearly an hour now. But yeah, no one's there. 50 quote tweets, but no one's there.
I actually, some of the original stuff that I post, like if I just type something up and then post it, there's times where I get quote tweeted and then I check the quote tweets to see who's talking shit about me, and then there's nothing there. I guess they have their account on private or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there are some people who like quote tweet and then block, or like attack you like behind a block so you can't even see the message. I get stuff like that too. I hate it when like someone who has me blocked is like tweeting about me, or like someone tweets about me and then they block me and I can't even respond. Man, it's really something else though. They make us out to be so ridiculous. They act like we're just saying all this insane stuff, but then when it comes down to actually proving it in terms of debate, they always get completely rolled. They either don't have the guts to show up, or they just get completely, utterly rolled and defeated.
Doesn't the presence of these leftoids around our own content kind of scare off more normal crowds? How would we best expand out when these motherfuckers are always on our dick?
Yeah.
It's so fucking weird. Like, their numbers are pretty much false, I'm pretty sure, if anything. And I see in like very normal posts by like just regular people, non-political, they have a very large outreach. And it shows that our own content is being like held behind these weirdos.
Yeah.
Here's the way I think it is, the structure of like Twitter. I remember looking at like this kind of like Twitter map where it showed like where the big hubs of like activity were. And we were basically outside of all the big hubs of activity, and we were kind of like our own small center that was like kind of reaching out into these other big hubs. The way I think the left functions is that they're kind of like a gate, right? A kind of a circle entrapping us, trying to stop us from breaking out into the masses. And so we have these hordes and hordes of leftists, right, who are basically gatekeeping us from the masses. And they're attempting to entrap us, encircle us. I think the only way.
I agree.
Yeah, I think the only way we can really deal with this is that we just fight through it, and we fight through it until we break through the gate. We will break through the gate. I mean, look at Jackson Hinkle. He broke through the gate. He defeated most of the big left-wing liberal content creators, and he broke through the gate. I think we were starting to break through the gate before on Twitch before Haas got banned. But then we got banned on Twitch, and we got banned on Discord, and it honestly has set us back. But I don't think infrared can be stopped. Maybe they can slow us down, but infrared is unstoppable. Infrared is rising. Infrared will rise. And when we have control of the Communist Party, and I have complete confidence we will take control of the Communist Party, we will be immortal and we will be unstoppable, because we will have united local organization with national media outreach. And that combination is completely unstoppable. Everything really hinges on whether or not we can take the Communist Party. Because if we take the Communist Party, it will prove to everyone that all the stuff we've been talking about, there's actually a reality behind it, right? There's actually something real, substantial behind it, that we actually were able to have an effect on political realities. So that's really the final ultimate test of infrared is, can we take the Communist Party? And I'm confident that we can. I can't tell you guys everything, but just from what I know, we are doing very well. Because here's what I will tell you: if you have any like insider information about these local Communist Party chapters, what you'll find is that most of these chapters are like dead, right? They'll have like 15, 20 members, right? But only like 5 of those members will actually be active. That's what makes it so easy for us to take over these parties, because they have such a low active membership. So I have complete confidence we're going to steamroll the Communist Party. And when we have the Communist Party in our hands, we will have been vindicated. We will have been objectively vindicated. It will be objective victory. And I think that will play a role in us breaking out into actually being able to reach the masses. Is this unity between the actual Communist Party as an organization and the infrared media platform? As far as the media goes, I think we just got to keep grinding it out.
That might be the case, actually. I think that the success, or at least the perceived success of leftoids, is based off of their perceived relation to the party. So any kind of a legitimacy through some kind of party is essentially what makes their platforms as big as they are. We know that we have the truth on our side, and I have an extreme amount of confidence that we're going to win this one out, just from the seeds I plant alone. So we just got to keep pushing forward, it seems. Yeah,
you're right. So much of it hinges on this idea of legitimacy, because if we have the Communist Party, it's like now they're not just rejecting infrared, right? They're actually rejecting the official Communist Party of America. They're rejecting the closest thing to like an official communist position in America, right? We objectively become the communists of America. That's why everything just hinges so much on the struggle for the future of the Communist Party USA, because it really does give us a kind of objectivity. It gives an objectivity to our subjective political position. It gives a kind of institutional objectivity to it. We can actually start to build the institution of the working class once we have the Communist Party in our hands. Like I said, I've from the people, the context I have, just me personally, that I talk to and the Communist Party, I have complete and utter faith that we will be successful. I don't think they stand any chance against us. And what we're doing, we're starting a process that will be the genesis of the new Communist Party of America. This is a world historic event that we are playing some kind of role in kicking off. We've had this kind of this great privilege from history to have this role fall upon us, that we could reinvigorate and reignite the Communist Party. This will be seen as one of the great ideological struggles within the Communist Party that led to the future of the Communist Party. I mean, just like the genesis of the Bolsheviks, right? This is something that could have that kind of potential if we can only, have the political courage and discipline to see this through. And I believe we do. I believe we do have the discipline and the courage to see this through. And I believe we will be victorious.
Will some of us be able to disclose to you some of the stuff that's going on in the party or sometime? Or
yeah, actually, I'm actually in communication with a lot of people inside of the party. So if there's anyone from Infrared in the party, they can always send me a DM. I actually have a lot of contacts in the party that I communicate with. But yeah, I'm still saying there's no one here to debate me. I think I'm going to continue this for at least another hour, just to give people a chance, just in case people don't know that I'm calling them out. But I don't know how they would not know now. I mean, I've directly responded to people asking them to debate me, and it's just like nothing. They're just You know, there's like birds chirping. It's like I asked them to debate me, and then they're nowhere to be found. First they say, "Oh my God, defend the Constitution. How could you call yourself a communist?" And I asked them to debate me, and where are they? They're nowhere to be found. And the reason why I want to debate too is because some of this stuff is so easy. Like the point that you should defend the Constitution is one of the most common sense points ever. It's like I said before, the Constitution is one of the only things that actually unites all Americans as Americans. Is the Constitution. It literally is the bedrock for the unity of America as a country. To reject that is to reject all of America. And how are you going to win over the American masses if you reject the thing that objectively gives them unity? If you reject one of the most unifying documents of their entire national existence, how can you gain leadership over them? That's so stupid. And not only is this true from this kind of common sense point that I'm saying right now, it's also true from the standpoint of the writings of Marx and Engels. So it's like if they want to be dogmatic, right? If they want to be dogmatic Marxist, well, okay, what did Engels say in one of the most basic writings, The Principles of Communism, very basic writing that was meant, to be spread around to just regular workers and so on. A very basic writing. What did he say in that? He said that it is the job of American communists to wield the Constitution against the bourgeoisie in working together with groups like the National Agrarian Reformers. That's pretty much what he says verbatim. That's what Engels says about the Constitution. Are they going to say Engels didn't know that America was founded on slavery or blah 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 blah, etc.? They just have nothing. They have absolutely nothing. From a Marxist standpoint, this is true. From a common sense standpoint, this is true. It's even ridiculous that you even have to argue something like this. Only leftists in America would argue that defending the Constitution is a bad thing. They are the only group politically in America that would even entertain this idea that you should completely reject the Constitution. Now, there may be amendments we can make to the Constitution. There may be additions, right? I support, for example, an economic Bill of Rights, stuff like that. There's stuff like that you could do, but rejecting the Constitution outright, that's... You know, another thing, too, is I feel like a lot of people have been gaslit by the Democrats' economic agenda, right? If you're a leftist and you exist in this kind of leftist echo chamber, you get gaslit into thinking that the essence of a socialist economic agenda is taxing the rich and redistributing wealth to the poor, and that this is the basis of a leftist economic agenda. That's not true. Historically, that's not true. That's not how communist countries have actually worked. That's not true at all. It's just simply
this
not
is
true.
This is something I'm seeing with a lot of organizers in general, or quote unquote organizers on the left, where they'll advocate for taxing the rich, but within the policy that they're advocating for, there's no guarantors for reinvigorating infrastructure, or like reinvigorating a dilapidated infrastructure like roads, bridges, or sidewalks, things that people use every day in order to get to and from to work or to and from the grocery store, like things that we take for granted, right? There's nothing about that. And there's also no guarantors for jobs. And within the tax the rich like policies that I've seen floating around, there's nothing that says that the money, if anything, it's just an excuse to further bloat the already like bloated coffers of the establishment. There's no guarantees that any of the money is going to be used on behalf of average Americans that really need help, or like through job programs or infrastructure, or developing, like you said, developing the forces of production, like things that people need to actually like continue to reproduce value in their lives. Because people need to drive to work, they need to travel, they need to go to the grocery store, they need to go to hospitals, whatever, you know what I mean? There's nothing in any of these policies practically that says that they're going to get any of that. And I don't know why that's left out of the discussion, you know?
Yeah, the point of communism, it's never been wealth distribution, really. It's never really been about wealth redistribution. The point is to reinvigorate the entire economy and produce new forms of wealth that outmode the currently existing ruling elites. And in the process of this, right, you do this in such a way that the goal is always, in the last instance, to benefit the majority of the people. I mean, if you look at the Communist Party of China, that's also basically how they do things, right? They expand their entire economy, and their political line is always to benefit the majority of the people of the country. Now, what is the most pressing? What are the most pressing problems that regular people in this country face? It's not a problem of envy, of having less than the richest person. It's a more basic, fundamental problem of how are you going to get baby formula? How are you going to pay for gas? How are you going to, how are you going to pay for gas so you can drive to work? How are you going to be able to have a house? How are you going to be able to start a family? It's these basic, fundamental things. And so my agenda, the CPUSA agenda that I put forward, it's meant to address these fundamental issues that common working class Americans face, right? Nationalization of primary industries. What does this allow for? It allows for cheaper primary goods like baby formula, right? Like food, like gasoline, et cetera, and so on. That's the point of nationalizing these primary industries, is you can ensure at a baseline, you're able to have goods that are necessities be cheap. What's the point of lowering taxes across all age groups? Well, it's going to reinvigorate the economy because it's going to and reinvigorate the market because it's going to promote spending across all groups. It's going to promote spending, and it's going to it's a way to promote spending without at the same time de-incentivizing labor and work. And also here's another thing too. It's like if you actually listen to what working class people want, they want lower taxes. This is one of the most popular positions in America, is to lower taxes. And these leftists think they're above the wisdom of the common people, and they think, oh, they don't know anything about economics. That's why they want to lower taxes. This is actually bad for them. They're just helping the ruling class. No, actually, sometimes the common people have more wisdom than the intellectuals. This is one of those cases where they have more wisdom than the intellectuals. They're actually right to want lower taxes. This actually would concretely benefit the average person, the great majority of people. It would on a personal level it would, but it also reinvigorate every sector and go hand in hand with this kind of reinvigoration of the American economy that we are trying to do. Reindustrialization, right? Now, what do you need for reindustrialization? For reindustrialization, you need new forms of infrastructure that make this industrialization possible, that make transportation of goods and so on, et cetera, easier, and all this kind of stuff. Infrastructure is meant to be kind of like the building blocks. It's kind of like a national means of production, right, for new forms of industry to come out. So they go hand in hand. And if you think about it, the reason why we have inflation is because of this, the death of the real productive economy. So reindustrialization will rebuild the productive economy, and so that America is no longer based merely off of this kind of financial parasitism, which is only maintained by these globalist institutions, which are, on the retreat. But can actually be based on actual productive economy. There was someone who was speaking earlier. You can.
I was going to say, I was going to add to your point. Don't you think that the Amtrak and our national railways are completely underdeveloped and neglected?
Yeah, the infrastructure in America is completely rotted out. It's like if you compare the infrastructure in America to the infrastructure in China, or even the infrastructure in Europe, even it's completely rotted out. It's absolutely pitiful for a modern economy to have this kind of infrastructure, to have this kind of railway system. It's completely pitiful. So for communists, one of the first goals is going to be infrastructural projects. This will both be the bedrock for a new industrialization, while at the same time giving people real, meaningful jobs. That's another thing that's important. I think leftists have this false idea that people want to work less. It's the opposite. The problem isn't that people want. Here's the thing. I agree with cutting the workday in half, but I think leftists have it upside down. It's like people don't want to work less. We don't have enough jobs. We actually need more jobs. That's the basis of any modern economy, is jobs. Even the establishment is smart enough to recognize the importance of jobs, whereas leftists are not. It's absolutely completely pitiful. We need jobs. Without jobs, there's nothing. Without jobs, you have no real economy. leftists think that an economy can exist in thin air because leftists come from a class of social parasites who have been fed off of U.S. imperialism, who have been fed off of this debtor's economy that we have, that they believe that the basis of wealth is this financial parasitism. No, the real basis of wealth is the productive real economy. It's manufacturing and industry, competitive, efficient manufacturing and industry. It's not this fake financial stuff. And it's because the American economy for so long has been based upon global finance that this idea is even sustainable whatsoever. In a kind of ironic way, these so-called anti-imperialist leftists, their entire economic agenda is rooted only in American imperialism and only could have a future if American imperialism is sustained. But as a communist, we recognize objectively this, even if we wanted it to be maintained, it can't be maintained. The American unipolar world order cannot be maintained. It is crumbling before our eyes. The elites realize it's crumbling, and we as communists must also realize it's crumbling. And in the place of it, we have to build a real productive economy. I think that's such a common sense thing, but people go so crazy over it. As far as small businesses go, they say that's a petite bourgeoisie. They say I'm a petite bourgeoisie revisionist because I want to cut taxes for small businesses. I'm a petite bourgeoisie shill.
But even Mao said we should align ourselves with the petty bourgeois.
Yeah, the democratic petty bourgeois has been the popular basis for every communist revolution in history. And even now today, after these revolutions, if you look in China, is China waging a war against small business? No, China's actually cutting taxes for small businesses. China actually has less barriers to entry for people who want to go into business than America does. This is actually just the standard default position of communists historically. And you want to know what the thing is? When they go against small business, it's not like they're going against small business and big business. Implicitly, they're supporting big business because historically been going on since 2008, and especially since the COVID crisis, is that big business has been eating up and tearing apart mom and pop stores and small businesses. Leftists are the political shills and goons of big business. That's what they're supporting when they go against small business. They're supporting these big quasi-national industries and businesses. That's all they're doing. That's all they're supporting. They're not actually going against business in general. They always think that because their position is abstractly, morally correct abstractly, that in practice it's also the same thing. No, in practice, all they're doing is supporting big business when they go against small business. Because there is this contradiction between the small business owner and the bourgeoisie that exists. And this contradiction is something that forges the basis for the proletariat and the working class being able to work together with small business owners and also these more petite bourgeois, type people. No revolution in history has ever been purely based only in one class. It's always been based on an alliance of classes. The bourgeois revolutions that happened, that brought about, the French Revolution and the American Revolution, it was based in an alliance with the peasantry. It wasn't just based in one class. The communist revolutions were typically the alliance between the proletariat and the peasantry, right? That's why you have the hammer and sickle. It's never just been one purely proletariat revolution. The revolution must be led by the proletariat, but it's never purely proletariat. And the proletariat is not ever a pure, the proletariat is the leader of the revolution, not necessarily the popular basis of it. The popular basis of it is actually the petite bourgeoisie. It's actually historically always been the petite bourgeoisie. Segments of it.
You could even point out the symbolism of the gear and hammer. The gear could be referencing to the industrialization of agriculture within the United States, even, so it could still represent the same thing in a certain way, in our own American way, which I think is actually very cool and unique about the Communist Party of the United States of America's symbol. And I was going to say that if you think about it, all this animosity towards people wanting to start their own business and wanting to strike out on their own, and try to fulfill the American dream and what have you. 70% of all business ventures within America fail. And I think that statistic, it's not just, I think that it's purposefully made that way. I think it's orchestrated, as you said, that the powers that be, like the monopoly ruling class, they want to consolidate all these different small businesses, small mom and pop shops that lose out to Target and to Walmart, but most recently to businesses like Amazon, who I think businesses like Amazon and Tesla, they can potentially be nationalized on behalf of the American people instead of being just like competitors. You know what I'm saying? Because they were built up off of American taxes anyways, you know?
Yeah, that's the thing. These big businesses like Tesla and like Amazon, they are already quasi-national businesses. Like if you look at Amazon, there are states where Amazon has paid zero taxes. There are years where Amazon paid nearly zero taxes. They are, for all intents and purposes, national industries. And yet, formally speaking, they still have the rights of private industries, right? So all I'm saying is, let's nationalize these industries. Let's make them national, not only in practice, but also in form, formally speaking. And let's take these industries even further, right? Let's take the advancements in the mode of production that these industries were able to achieve, and let's actually take those advancements even further. And like you said, instead of having them be at the expense of small business and the American people in general, instead of having them be these antagonistic monopolies, they can be institutions of the American people. They can be national industries. I completely agree with you on that. And another thing is this, when one of the things take away the need for taxation, right? The reason why some communist countries have such a low tax rate is because they make a lot of money from their national industries. Part of the reason why the DPRK was able to completely get rid of income tax is because of nationalization of industry. So yeah, I completely agree with you. Right now in America, we have so many industries that function as national industries, but are not beholden to the people, are not, formally speaking, actually national. The same thing is true for social media, right? It functions as a public institution. It is tied up with the intelligence community. It's tied up with the actual media. It's tied up with all these other institutions in America. But then, formally speaking, it's not a national industry. Just nationalize it. If Trump would have been really based, if instead of just going against the media, he just nationalized the media and the social media. That's what dark MAGA should be, that kind of shit, right? Nationalizing the media, nationalizing social media. But when you say base stuff like that on Twitter, it gets, all the bots will come after you. All the bots will tag onto your post. All the NPCs will attack you just for being based. That's how you know someone is based on Twitter. If they're hated, they're probably based. Because you don't even get that much hatred for saying stuff that's actually stupid. You don't really get that much hatred for actually being like an evil, bad person. You really get hatred just for being based, right? Like if you on Twitter, we literally get more hate than fascists. Why? It's not because we're bad. It's not because we're evil. It's not even because it's not that we're anti-communist. We are explicitly communist, and we're communists also essentially and fundamentally. But we get all these hate from leftists. Why? It's because anything that has a popular orientation, anything that actually aligns with the real sentiments and strivings of the people, they want to cut down and destroy. I'm always going to be for lowering taxes. I feel like throughout most of our lives, we've been lied to by the Democratic media apparatus that and told that, if you lower taxes, then everything's going to be worse because we're going to have less social goods and less social institutions, so on. And yet we have high taxes. And we have a terrible healthcare system. And the only institution in our country that actually works well is the military. That's the actual truth. The only institution that actually benefits from this crazy taxation is the military. It's not actually the people. It's never the people. Hey, hello, I just brought you on. Were you someone who wanted to debate? Hey, are you there? Hello? The guy I just brought on, did you want to debate?
You talking about Z-Skull?
Yeah, or is he one of our guys?
I think he is one of our guys.
Yeah, he does have Z in the username. Okay, I'm just going to continue what I was saying.
He said I retweeted your post that describes the infrared's like platform for the transformation of the CPUSA, and he said the only thing that's missing is Medicare for all.
I like Medicare for all. I like Medicare for all. I agree with Medicare
I was about to say it's kind of something that's just I thought it's just kind of like a given.
Yeah. I like Medicare for all. Here's the thing though, my Medicare for all position, it's that forced to vote Jimmy Dore position, right? I think that Medicare for all, it really all depends on do you what you really mean by it, right? Like when AOC said Medicare for all, she didn't actually mean that. She was just using that to manipulate and deceive the people, right? But when someone like Jimmy Dore says Medicare for all, he means he's willing to go to war with the establishment to fight for a popular demand for the people. And at the time, Medicare for all was actually a popular demand. You want to know what's so ironic? The thing that made Medicare for all unpopular, it was not the actual policy itself. It was the fact that it was associated with Democrats. That's why Medicare for all became distrusted by some people. It's because it became associated with Democrats who have for so long lost the trust of the people. But when you wield Medicare for all on a populist people's basis, like Jimmy Dore does, yeah, I completely, utterly agree with that. The only reason why I don't emphasize it that much is because I feel like so often it has been used as like a Democrat. I do agree with it. I was completely behind the forced to vote stuff when that happened. 100% behind it. And I think there's kind of a lesson to learn from Medicare for all too. The lesson is that it's these moderate demands, which to some extent even have a basis in the establishment itself, that can really reveal the contradictions within the establishment. Because when the establishment actually fails to uphold these kind of moderate demands that even make sense within its own logic, they reveal themselves to be frauds, right? That's what happened with AOC, right? It was when her own policy was wielded against her that she was revealed to be a fraud. So there is a wisdom there. There is a deep wisdom there. Maybe in a similar way, some of these more Republican or conservative policies can be wielded against the neocons. Because these neocons, they do the same thing as the Democrats, right? They completely sell out the American people, and when they're not even willing to give a few $1 million for baby formula, they'll try to give $60 billion to Ukraine. It's absolutely absurd and it's absolutely ridiculous. The same people who want to give billions of dollars to Ukraine, they can't invest millions of dollars in baby formula. And so I want to take on all these sellouts. I want to take on all these liars in DC. It's like that Batman movie. We are vengeance. We are vengeance. We are vengeance. We are the American people who were left behind by the deindustrialization of the establishment, which has ruined lives. Which has we're the people who had their communities destroyed and devastated by the opioid epidemic, which was pushed by the pharmaceutical companies themselves. We represent those.
I was gonna say I retweeted a guy who said, let me see if I can find it. He said in response to Biden just blatantly saying that he's willing to militarily intervene if China were to quote unquote invade Taiwan, even though it's their own province. He said they're trying to get us into a world war in order to avoid a civil war.
That's complete facts. That's complete facts. That's complete facts. And you want to know what I say to that? Turn the imperialist war into a civil war. The same thing Lenin said. Turn the imperialist war into a civil war. The real enemies of the American people are at home. The real enemies of the American people are at home. The real globalists who have rotted out the American economy are based in America and in England. They're not in Russia. They're not in China. They're in America and in England.
One of the biggest hurdles we have in front of us, though, is we were able to do the infrared community, like the collective, like you and Haas did a good job of debunking the Ukraine shit. Jackson Hinkle did an amazing job debunking the Ukraine shit. Samira did a good job. Caleb did a really good job. And I think that helped a lot, like shedding light on that situation. But one of the biggest hurdles in front of us is the successful disinformation campaign against China. in America. There's a broad distrust against China, but I think that's shifting, especially amongst the Make America Great Again type of crowd. I think that's shifting because of the stalwart, like shining leadership of Xi Jinping just being so clandestine and authentic that it shifted some Trump supporters' mentality towards the country, right? But I think that that's going to be more difficult because there's been decades of like how China's social credit system completely steals your underwear and throws you across the street into the stratosphere, and then they kill your dog. You know, like there's been years of that. Yeah.
I think really one of the it's all going to coalesce really into the China stuff. That's really what that's what this all is tending towards, is America's push for war in China, and the anti-war movement during that time will be like one of the most defining political contradictions in American history. And it's like you said, this is actually a very difficult battle yet, because with Russia, MAGA already created a kind of pro-Russia populism with Trump. But the reason why that happened was because I think, as Haas said in one of his streams recently, is because there are segments of the ruling elites who want to use Russia against China, right? You know, like Tucker Carlson type people who want to ally with Russia to kind of get them a little bit further away from China so that they can focus geostrategically more on China. But I think this contradiction within the elites that's caused this kind of more pro-Russian populism, we can exploit this opening and use this as a kind of gateway for also awakening the people to the role that China has in fighting against the American establishment. Because really, it is truly China, more than any other country, which is outmoding the globalist elites and the American establishment. And I think it's one of the most important goals we have is to reveal to the people this contradiction, right? Because the people are being sold these lies, and they're basically the agenda of the American deep state is to paint China as being the globalist country, right? That's the agenda of the American deep state, is to paint China as being working together with these globalist overlords and billionaires, and you're right, China's bought out Disney and all this stuff, right? That's what the elite's agenda is. Our agenda and our position is that no, actually it's China who's threatening the American establishment more than anything else. And I think that's concretely provable, right? I mean, China is America's biggest enemy in terms of the American deep state. And we have to demonstrate that and show that to the people. And at the same time, we have to combat these fake MLs who have given this liberal presentation of China, which I think has only served to make people distrust China even more. So I think we've already done part of the job, which was taking on these fake MLs. But the next job, which is going to be a kind of popular awakening to this alliance that the American people have with Xi Jinping, is the next step and the more difficult one. But that's why I made that tweet earlier. I think I got around 200 likes where I said that the Communist Party of China is the most anti-establishment, anti-globalist force in the world, and American patriots must unite with it. Because that's true. It honestly is. Who was going up against George Soros most effectively? It's the Communist Party of China. It's Xi Jinping who is going up against George Soros most effectively, more effectively than any other person in the world right now. It's Xi Jinping who is challenging him. And George Soros is the guy behind all these left-wing NGOs, all these liberal NGOs, and all this shit. Is George Soros behind it. There's other elites, but George Soros is like the left wing of the elites. It's George Soros. And so I think it's this kind of contradiction that we have to weaponize and wield. And it's only going to be if we're able to do this on a more national level. So like with Trump, with the MAGA movement, on a national level, people were awoken to this kind of pro-Russian aesthetic and populism. We're going to need something similar. On a national level, we're going to have to awaken people to a different perspective on China. And I think if we can take over the CPUSA in the next National Congress, and if we can get someone into the American Congress, right into the House of Representatives, by 2026, If we can do that, then we actually can start a national movement. Really, what it's going to coalesce to is our ability, working together with Jackson and Caleb and Samira and all those people to get someone into office. Because the moment you actually get someone into office, then you gain complete national recognition, right? You have your own guy who's in office and actually represents your political position officially in the American government. You've proven yourself to the people. You've proven that you actually have some form of pragmatic political effectiveness and ability to win. That's what it's going to boil down to. And when we have someone, our own guy in the government, in the Congress, who can work together with other more populistic elements, that's when I think we can actually start an effective anti-war movement against the war that's being pushed in China. We're going to have to get someone into office. It's like what Haas always says, it's about verticality. We have to have that singular representative, our guy who represents the entire movement and is before the view of the entire American people. And I honestly think it's possible, right? I mean, it's difficult, but if you think about it, like Geoff Young, he's just some old guy with like a website that looks like it was made in like 2005, and look at how successful he is, right? If he can do it, I think we can do it. I think if Geoff Young is able to do it by having a really smart local Kentucky strategy, we can also do the same thing. The dialectic that's at hand here is the dialectic of the national movement and the local organization. And if we can master this dialectic of having the correct, precise local strategy and organization, and also a popular national movement, I think we can actually get someone into Congress. I think we can do it. That's what it really always takes. The proper local strategy and organization and the right national media apparatus. That's what got AOC into power. That's what got, all these MAGA people into power. It's that. On the one hand, you can't ignore the social media, the kind of more national sphere of media and public perception and influence. Then on the other hand, you also can't ignore the more determinate, particular local realities. We're going to need savvy people on the ground who actually understand the constituency that they're trying to represent in a very profound way. We're going to need, the kind of media people that we're trying to be. We're going to need both of those really. I think we can do that because the whole point of the Communist Party is to produce winners. It's to produce people who have a scientific understanding of reality, and through this scientific understanding of reality can find success, right? The way that infrared blew up is because we had our own media theory, our own theory of media, our own scientific understanding of how media works. And through this, we were able to gain some level of success. The same thing has to happen on a local level. We need smart communists who can think dialectically and scientifically, who can, in a very deep and a rich way, understand the strivings of their local constituency and win them over. It's all about understanding the particular realities of the constituency you're trying to win. It's really what it's all about when it comes to winning an election. And the way I try to explain it is this: you don't just appeal to what people already believe. You appeal to a truth that is even more fundamental to them than what they currently believe. You appeal to their more fundamental striving in a way that's even better than what the establishment can do. I mean, like, if you look at Geoff Young, right, he's not really just appealing to stuff that's already popular. Abolish the CIA was not already popular, right? He's not just pandering to already popular positions. He's taking a relatively unique and risky position, but at the same time has maybe either through his own wisdom or maybe even accidentally has gained a popular basis in Kentucky and has actually able to create some kind of Kentucky aesthetic that to some extent appeals to the people. I don't know if he's going to win, right? I don't know if he's going to be able to win, but he was able to beat the Democrat, so he's obviously successful on some level. So that's what you have to do. You have to understand your constituency even better than they understand themselves. You should never think of yourself as above them. It's more like you're deeper than them. It's more like, it's not like you're going above, you're going even deeper. That's what Lenin said. You go lower and deeper into the masses. And that's how you arrive at this new form that represents them even more accurately than the things they already believe in and have already been taught by the ruling elites in the media. The position that communists have to take, it's always dialectical. Like, so leftists make the mistake of they'll just act like they're entirely above the people, and they'll just completely reject the people wholesale and the entirety of the people's wisdom. Then on the other hand, you have more opportunistic people, and they'll just try to pander and appeal to what the people already believe. The communist position is neither one of those. It's always a dialectical sublation of these two kinds of oppositions. And when you can start thinking like this, if we can have, just multitudes of communists who are thinking like this, I think we can win. I think we can win. I think we can get someone into Congress. And when we have someone into Congress, then we have actual national recognition, and we can actually start a national anti-war movement. So that's what I think we're going to have to do in respect to the situation with China. We're going to have to actually start a national anti-war movement that we're able to draw attention to via actually having some degree of political power and having some real political representation in the Congress. And another thing I think we should look into, we are focused specifically on building the Communist Party, but another very hopeful avenue, I think, is the People's Party. They've been, building up that organization for the last few years. And I think they may run candidates, those People's Party people, for an anti-war movement, because a lot of them are very anti-war. I think if it really came down to it, like a war of China over Taiwan, I think Jimmy Dore type people would be completely against it, because they might not necessarily be pro-China, but they're definitely going to be anti-war in this kind of situation. So we can work together with also these kind of more broader populist forces who will be sympathetic to our position, even if not in complete agreement. Hey, I just Hey, what's up?
That was very succinctly put. Yeah.
But yeah, I know I've been saying this a lot, but it's really disappointing that, like, after all this, I've challenged so many people specifically to debate me on the topic of this tweet, and no one's actually come up and accepted my offer to debate. I've even I've literally replied to several people. I've directly replied to several people, telling them to debate me. People who replied to me, right, who said that my position was so crazy. I even have people saying that I'm a Fed and stuff like this, right? But none of them want to debate me. I don't get it. Have we actually reached the point where I've defeated so many Twitter leftists that now they're scared to debate me?
When you press them on this shit, they don't believe in anything they fucking say. They don't give a shit. All of this shit that they do, all this shit all this rah-rah, all this riffraff, all this smoke coming out of their mouth and shit, it's a hobby. They treat it like a fucking hobby. They think this shit's a fucking video game. They don't care about people. They don't care about they don't care about what happens to this country or what the legacy of this nation may become. They don't give a fuck. It's just a hobby where they air out their grievances and they all fucking jerk each other off. And that's it. They don't actually believe in any of the shit that they say. Every time when they come out of the woodwork, out of the fucking peanut gallery and talk out the side of their fucking neck, but then they don't say it with their chest to your face. They always talk out the side of their fucking neck. They don't believe in any of the shit that they say. If you press them on it and you meet them with the energy of authenticity, you meet it I'm actually about this. I'm real. I'm here for this. And I want people to know that you can believe in me and I can be relied upon. And I actually give a fuck. They get scared. They get terrified when they find out people actually believe in the shit that they say. They don't actually, all these criticisms they raise against Haas and Henry and fucking Grayson and Alex and all the shit that they talk, it's bullshit. It's bullshit. They never back it up. And even when you get them in the VC, they get quiet as fuck when they find out you're being serious. They get quiet as fuck. They don't, or they're not able to back up any of the shit that they say. They're not able to back up anything. They're scared.
I swear every time someone gets in the VC and debates Haas, it's always this. Either they're hi Haas, I really didn't really mean all that stuff I was saying. Let's just talk about this more politely now. Or on the other hand, they'll be deranged, right? They'll just be a really crazy, psychotic person like Tank. It's either those two, and then every now and again, there'll be someone who's actually willing to debate, but they'll usually just be a dumb fuck, and they won't actually know what they're talking about at all. They'll just get completely destroyed. And I think now we've gotten to this point where we've become so infamous for defeating all these leftists, that now they're scared to actually debate us. They don't even want to debate us now. They'll fight us on Twitter, right? Because they know Twitter is not like really a space where you can have a full like decisive debate. But they won't actually have a real debate with us. They won't even have a real text debate with us. Like when we make Substacks, no one ever responds to them. I remember I wrote a Substack about Roderick Day. And this post I saw on Genzadong, right? I wrote a Substack about it, specifically about Roderick Day's claim that we are tailist and the claim that we are Durangist, right? During. I'm probably not pronouncing that right. That's the German guy. I wrote specifically about that, and I completely and utterly debunked him. Completely. And did he respond to that? No. Did he tweet about that? No. Did he write an essay about that? No. Did he debate me about that? No. Silence. Peanut gallery. Nothing. Nothing. Just birds chirping. He did nothing. He did nothing. Whenever we addressed them on an intellectual ground, they completely retreat. They completely fall away. Did Luna Oi ever reply to Haz's Substack? No, she didn't. Because on an intellectual level, I think the thing that they don't get is that, like, because we have so much bravado and so much energy and courage and so on, they think that we must be stupid because we're so like, because we're so energetic or whatever. So because we have this kind of energy, what they call a patriarchal energy or whatever. They think we must be meatheads basically. They think we have to be stupid. But then when they find out, oh, actually they're really smart too. It's like they don't have any way to respond, right? It's this unity between, on the one hand, this kind of like, I think we got someone who might want to debate. This is perfect. Hey, you want to debate?
Oh, I just had some questions I wanted to ask you about your program.
Yeah, go ahead.
So when you talk about land reform, does that just mean like nationalizing the land? Or is it like, do you actually want to like give like plots of land to like everyone? Like, well, what does it look like in the modern USA?
So I think in the USA, I think full nationalization of land would not be very popular here. It worked very well in Russia, but I don't think it would necessarily be very popular in America. And we would have to gain the trust of the people to actually do something like that. I'm not necessarily speaking of a nationalization of the land. What I'm thinking is, one, there will be actual opportunities to get plots of land and so on that's given to people. But it won't just be that. I'm thinking of land more so in terms of like in a more abstract sense of economic space. So what this means for me is like, grants and opportunities to start small businesses, or even UBI, like stuff like UBI and stuff like this, that makes it easy for people to be able to start businesses, have houses and so on. I'm thinking in terms of, one, lower the barrier for being able to buy a house. Make it reasonable and easy and cheap for people to be able to get houses. Two, lower the barrier for being able to start businesses. Make it easier and cheap for people to be able to start businesses. Three, I'm thinking also in terms of UBI. And four, I'm also thinking in terms of actual land reform. This doesn't have to be agricultural land necessarily. It could just be the land for a office that you want to have, or a land for a business you want to start. Because land is just economic space. It's really all it is economic space. I don't think we really know fully what determinate form land reform will take in America. I think that's something that will have to be decided on a more specific level by experts and actually through the institution of the party. But these are the kind of ideas that I have. I think Yang's UBI, as bad as it was a kind of it was almost like an establishment form attempt at land reform. But I think we can do this a lot better than he did. We can give people money, property, land, and education, and the technology they need to actually be able to prosper. That's what I have in mind. So think in terms of think in terms of land, property, education, technology.
So, listen, this kind of reminds me of some of the policies that Nicaragua has right now, where they do promote, small businesses. And I think that a policy like that, if I'm going to, pretty much only makes sense in, a super undeveloped country where you're just, trying to develop a more, robust capitalism, I guess. So you just have more wealth spread around in general, which is kind of, the kind of strategy that Nicaragua seems to be taking. But, listen, I think if we're trying to get to socialism, we don't want to promote petty ownership, like petty producers and like small ownership of like property. Like our aim is to like socialize all that stuff as much as possible.
Yeah, well, here's my
seems like you're just
I have a response to that.
You're empowering the petty bourgeois.
Yeah. Here's a response. I have a response to that though. So my first response is that I don't think this would just be effective in underdeveloped countries. I think actually in America specifically, this would be specifically in America extremely effective, because right now in America we have a crisis where not only are people not able to own productive land, right, land that's used for business, they're also not able to own land that's just used for living. Right now we have a problem where people are not able to actually own houses. That's why I spoke of, making it easier and cheaper for people to be able to have houses, right? Maybe even giving people housing and houses and stuff like that. So we actually do face a crisis in America where people don't own anything. We're facing a crisis in America where people are being proletarianized in an unprecedented way and don't own anything. The goal of communism is not actually it's not to promote the proletariat per se. It's to build the party of the proletariat who's not promote the existence of proletarians, but to give the proletariat a new basis, a new institutionalized basis in the state that was removed when the peasantry underwent this proletarianization and lost their land in various forms. Like in England, it was the enclosures and so on. The actual role of the Communist Party is to return the proletariat into being a kind of peasantry with land and
that literally is the whole point. The whole point of Marxism. The whole argument that Marx is making in Capital is that like the proletariat cannot achieve emancipation on the basis of restoring small producership, but has to collectively take over and plan the means of production as a collective.
I didn't say. Wait a second. I didn't say that the proletariat would just become a class of small producers. This is one. The land reform is one of the entire list of things I'm doing. There's also here's the thing though about your argument about socialization. I think the socialization you're talking to already happened as far as socializing production. We already have an economy where production is almost entirely socialized. Like, you know that, right? So this socialization and production you're talking about, it's not actually something that has to be done politically, because it already happened objectively and economically. I think we just need to take that even further and nationalize some of these industries that already function as national industries. Like, for example, Amazon, it already functions as a national industry because it gets all these subsidies and tax cuts. So we should just nationalize Amazon. I also think we should nationalize primary industries, production of like necessary goods, like for example, like food and gasoline and baby powder and these kinds of like primary goods. I think we should nationalize that as well. Things that already function as public institutions, just make them formally public. As far as the actual transformation in the mode of production goes, though, that already happened in the middle of World War I and World War II, when there was the Great Depression and FDR rose to power. He already did that socialization of the mode of production. I mean, that already happened like 100 years ago. We're way past just the advent of socialism. What's really decisive now is putting political power in the hands of the working class through the party of the proletariat, and then through the institution of that party, pushing through these kinds of policies that benefit the great majority of the American people. And I think land reform would definitely do that. If people can get houses more cheaper, that would definitely solve one of the social crises that we are facing. If people are able to start businesses more easily, that would solve the problem of big business eating up all the small businesses that's happened during the COVID crisis. We actually have a crisis where small business is dying out and being eaten up by big business. That is a problem, because when you just have big business, you don't actually have a thriving market. You don't actually have competition. You don't actually have a thriving economy. I think what a lot of people don't get is that socialism is not supposed to be the end of competition. Socialism is actually what allows competition to be restored from monopoly capitalism. capitalism. And that's the way it functions, for example, in China, which is not just a poor, underdeveloped country. It does have underdeveloped segments, but it's not just a poor, underdeveloped country. They actually use the Communist Party actually tries to invigorate the market and maintain competition and promote small businesses. Like right now, they're actually, this year in 2022, they also cut taxes for small business. So I think promoting small business is entirely good for the economy and in the favor of the vast majority of the American people. And that's ultimately the goal of a communist.
Well, I mean, but here, listen, like just from a pure pragmatic level, like if you're promoting like the rise of a petty bourgeoisie, you are creating like a social basis for like counter-revolution against your socialist order or whatever. Like,
no, that's not true at all. That's not true at all. Listen to me. Every communist country in the world has promoted the petty bourgeoisie
to them making money, just like the Soviet bureaucracy did as well. Like they're going, as soon as you start having like all these market reforms and all these like kind of market socialists, like, you know, and some of them might be necessary. Like, I'm not like saying we can like get rid of markets inevitably, but like this whole idea that like, you know, a socialist state can just kind of use market mechanisms as a totally neutral thing for a socialist sense, I think is just total nonsense. Because the more you produce like a petty bourgeoisie through these kind of like, you know, land reform like ideas that you have, instead of using those resources to basically socialize social services, because in the end we are trying to universalize the proletarian condition. We are trying to like it's
the opposite. You're not trying to universalize the proletarian. You're trying to abolish classes. You literally want to abolish classes. We want to sublate classes in general. So you don't universalize the way you. So yeah, it's the opposite though. I'm saying you don't universalize the proletariat condition. You actually want to get rid of the proletariat condition. You actually the whole point of the party of the proletariat is to get rid of the conditions that led to the existence of the proletariat in the first place. Being a proletarian is not a good or a positive thing, right? It means you own nothing. Being a proletarian means you own nothing but your own labor. We don't want people to want people to be like that. We actually want people to be able to own stuff, to be able to prosper, and to be able to have dignified lives. The whole purpose of communism is to get rid of the proletariat.
Okay, yes, I agree that the point is to get rid of the proletariat. But to do that, you have to universalize the situation of the proletariat while simultaneously overcoming it, which is what the dictatorship of the proletariat is. It's the proletariat is universalizing its conditions and turning everyone into a proletarian, as well as overcoming its position as a proletarian itself by using its state power to abolish the class.
Wait, did you just say?
Wait a second. No, I want to make this fair. Don't respond. I want to make this fair. I just want to make this 101, just so it'll be fair. So I'm just going to respond to that. I don't think that's true at all. The thing that you're basically saying in practice, what it would mean is this: everyone loses their land, everyone loses their property, and they become basically these kinds of desperate people who have little to no bargaining power, just have to work. I mean, that's the exact opposite of what communists historically have tried to achieve.
No,
wait a second. Let me finish. I'll let you finish. Let me finish. I'll let you finish. Proletarianization is not what we're trying to achieve. Proletarianization is not a something that can really be preserved. It's more like a transitionary process. The peasantry produces the proletariat when modernity comes around, right? But modernity is actually an historical exception, right? It's these the exceptional conditions of modernity that give rise to a proletariat in the first place. The job of the Communist Party is to deliver the proletariat from this transitionary phase, from this transitionary and transient existence, back into being a new kind of peasantry, which is actually the baseline for history in general. Back into having wait a second. Let me finish. Back into having a actual solid basis, right? Capital melts all into thin air. We want to return people to the ground. That's the point of communism. Now, as far as the proletariat controlling the means of production, right? That happens politically through the dictatorship of the proletariat. I agree with you, right? I agree with you that happens politically through the dictatorship of the proletariat. But the agenda of the proletariat, when it rises to political power, is not to proletarianize everyone. It's never been to just proletarianize all of the peasantry, or to it's just never historically it's never been that. Proletarianization was not something that had to be politically led as a process. It was something that objectively occurred because of industrialization and modernization and these new forms of production and wealth that was being created. Now, if we actually take a look throughout history and through in examples of communist countries, this idea that using market forces to benefit the majority of the people is impractical, not pragmatic, and not possible, is false. If you actually look at the historical experience of China, they have been able to do this so successfully that they now have an economy that's completely outmoded the American economy and is overthrowing the globalist American unipolar world order. So they've actually, in practice, completely disproved the point you were making. The problem with Khrushchev and Gorbachev and so on, it was not that they tried to do market reforms. That was not the problem. The problem is that these market reforms, it was the class basis of these reforms. It was the class character of it. It was because when Stalin died, there was a new party bureaucracy and a new party elite that took over in the place of Khrushchev. And unlike in China, where there was a cultural revolution, which allowed for the peasantry, the popular petite bourgeoisie, right, as opposed to the urban petite bourgeoisie, that allowed for the peasantry to reassert itself and to reassert its realities. And in the USSR, there was never this cultural revolution that allowed for that reinvigoration of the proletarian dictatorship. And the proletarian dictatorship basically withered away and fell away. The problem was not the market reforms. I mean, market reforms were universal. Market reforms happened in America. Market reforms were an objective reflection of a transformation in the mode of production that was going on. And China, a communist country, was, by the way, the most successful in it. So I think this idea that market reforms and utilizing the market for the benefit of the people isn't possible is just completely historically disproven. Another point I want to make in respect to that is that I think China's socialism is actually even more advanced than the USSR socialism, because using the thriving market is able to gather real economic data from the people that can't be like dictated discursively or formally. It gathers that real economic data of what people want to buy, what people need, et cetera, and so on. And it's able to use that information for the planning of its economy and for directing these market forces towards the benefit of the people. So in a way, the expanding of the market actually allows for even better state planning, because it allows for the gaining of more information. Now, as far as the petite bourgeoisie goes, you have to make the distinction between what kind of petite bourgeoisie are we talking about. The Bolsheviks spoke of the democratic petite bourgeoisie and the urban petite bourgeoisie. I'm not trying to promote the urban petite bourgeoisie, which has a basis in the currently existing American institutions. Like these people who work for Wall Street and these people who work for these software companies and so on, whose economic power and wealth and so on is predicated based upon, one, America's financial parasitism, and two, American institutions, universities, and so on. I'm trying to promote the rural, popular, democratic petite bourgeois tendency, and not as the dominant tendency, but as the popular basis for the proletariat dictatorship, because this is actually the form that proletarian dictatorship has always taken historically. It took the form of the proletariat taking leadership of the popular petite bourgeoisie and working together with the popular petite bourgeoisie. If you actually look through the early USSR political struggles and so on, it was always finding the right balance between the class interests of the popular, the middle peasant, and the proletariat. It was always about finding that kind of sweet spot of that unity between the proletariat and the peasantry. I think in America, we need another unity of the proletariat and the peasantry against the imperialist, globalist bourgeoisie. That's all I'm suggesting.
Okay, but who is the peasantry in America? Like, is that like the rural, like, MAGA people, basically?
I mean, yeah, primarily so. It is primarily the rural MAGA people, but it's like I said, I don't think that this movement just involves them. I think if we want to speak specifically of American conditions, it's going to be a unity of those lower level service workers and teachers and nurses and Walmart workers, these kind of like lower level service workers that voted for Bernie in 2016, because there were a lot of them, right? And it's going to be a unity of those people with the kind of rural proletariat, the old kind of like manufacturing and industrial class, which has been rotted out by deindustrialization, along with truckers and also small business owners who are undergoing proletarianization due to the social crisis we are having. It's going to be a unity of those segments of America. That's what I think in American, a center between them, even a center between these different groups is what will form the popular basis for a successful communist party in America.
Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting how you see it that way. Like, I think, I really think it's basically like the movement has to, it's going to have to take lead among like the urban working class first, and large cities, and also I think generally, I think
I gotta disagree. I gotta disagree with you on that. If you look at the historical experience of communism, the error that failed communists always made was that they overemphasized the urban elements over the rural elements. And the successful communists always gave a greater emphasis to the rural elements, right? What separated Lenin from the Mensheviks and from most of the other left-wing groups of the time, it's not just the proletariat, right? It's not just going to be the proletariat. It's also going to be the peasantry. That was unique at the time, right? That was a revolutionary, unique position to have that set him apart from all the other social democrats. And then in China, the peasantry had an even bigger role in the revolution, right? The whole like Mao Zedong thing was encircle the cities with the countryside. So I think the problem that most leftists in America have right now is that they're too urban and that they too much give up on the rural working class and the rural.
Yeah, I mean, there is the cultural kind of divide. There is this kind of like, urban cosmopolitanism in the U.S. left or whatever that probably does actually alienate like a lot of rural workers. But, I don't think it's possible to overcome that. Like, it's impossible. I don't think it is impossible to overcome that. And I think, with Lenin, like his whole point was that like the peasantry could be won over in the democratic revolution. But after the pass of the democratic revolution, like the peasantry would split and the poor peasants would be like in a class struggle against, the upper peasants. And so he never thought that the whole peasantry as a whole would be like interested in socialism. Is the thing.
Yeah, but that's the thing though. The actual basis, not just for Lenin's revolution, but even later on after the democratic revolution, right? The whole basis for Stalinism, it wasn't the poor peasant, it was the middle peasant. It was actually the middle peasant that was the basis for Stalinism. Now there are kulaks, right? There are kulaks among the peasantry, and a class war must be waged against them. I completely agree with that. Class war must be waged against kulaks. But the basis of Stalinism was not primarily the poor peasantry. It was actually the middle peasant. And I think we also need to win over the middle peasant in America. Now, as far as this cultural gap between the cities and the countryside, well, I think about this like a materialist, right? Where does the city actually arise from? Where do institutions historically actually arise from, right? Cities and institutions actually arise from the countryside. And so in a way, the countryside is almost like the base, while cities are the superstructure, right? That's why also cities are kind of the centers of ideology and media and information and knowledge and so on, because they are kind of the superstructure, whereas the countryside is the base. And so for me, I think even in a materialist way, the countryside is more fundamental than the city, because the countryside is the very material basis from which cities arise from, right? Also, I think the way we have to understand what the countryside is in America has to be fitting to 21st century conditions. It's not going to be like what a small town would equal in the census, right? Because it's kind of based upon stuff that's outdated by decades. It's obviously not going to be the classical peasantry, right? I think it's going to be like this kind of like middle towns and small towns and so on that used to have strong industry, but now are, have had their industries rotted out and don't have the same kind of jobs they used to have. I mean, when Bernie was most successful, it was when he was able to appeal not only just to these kind of like lower level service workers, but also to people in the Rust Belt who just wanted to have good jobs again. So I think that segment of the American populace, that is a very popular, powerful basis that the Communist Party cannot do without. Some of these cultural, and as far as the cultural divisions go, I think some of these cultural divisions are very artificial. I think a lot of these cultural divisions really are artificial. They come from not necessarily the people, but they come from the institutions, because that's what the cities really represent. Cities don't necessarily represent the people that live in them as much as they represent institutions. When I use the word cities and countrysides, I want you to think about this in a more modern, abstract sense. Like, what does urban really connotate? For me, urban connotates institutions, universities, media, professionals, etc. It has this kind of connotation. What does rural connotate? Right, rural connotates space, land, tradition, cultures, kind of the bedrock of what makes America America. So I think there's a fundamental importance of the countryside in America that can't really be ignored. Now, is it just going to be the countryside? No, I don't believe that. I do think it's going to be more than just a MAGA demographic. I think that's only one side of the picture per se. But I think we cannot lose that segment. These are the people that are the most hated by the establishment and the most left behind by the establishment. And as communists, it's our duty to give true and real representation to their strivings. When one speaks of the people, it's never just the people in aggregate. It's always the ground of the people, the soil of the people. It's the people always refers to the countryside. And so when communists say they love the people, they're talking about something very deep and ancient almost, and rooted, something almost unconscious. When they speak of the people. And this is also what I mean when I speak of the people, and when I speak of the countryside, and when I speak of Maoism and all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like, I just think there's just a big ideology gap between us on this question, because I don't think that the people is like this thing rooted like in the agricultural soil or whatever, which is like the true body of a nation. I mean, I just feel like that's like it's just it just doesn't make sense to me, that kind of like talk about like
Let me appeal to you on a common sense level then, okay? If you want to look at America and you say what parts of America are the most culturally recognizable and the most culturally distinct as American, it's going to be places like the Bible Belt, which is also the Black Belt. It's going to be places like the Rust Belt. It's going to be places like even like places in Texas. It's going to be like these kinds of even when you go to the Southwest, it's not going to be the cities in California. It's going to be more like, it's going to be even more so the wasteland and the deserts almost on a very visceral level. It's like these kinds of very rural places are really the hotbeds of what we would consider American culture, even on a very common sense level. I mean, if you look at it also historically, politically, where have a lot of the major American political movements started from? I mean, where did abolition come from, right? Abolition, despite the fact that the South was the center of slavery and so on, and they used religious justifications for justifying slavery and so on. Abolition had a spiritual basis as well, also in the Quakers and in these kinds of religious movements and so on. Despite its obvious a reality that took form in the North. I think.
Well, let me just say this: that like, I don't think that like nation building projects are like some extension of like the rural common people's culture. Like nation building projects are like very deliberate, like attempts by class alliances to, you know, construct like, you know, qualities around like a specific, you know, ideal language and culture. And yes, they'll like draw on like the rural masses and their traditions to make that culture, but it's still very much like a top down constructed process of deliberate, you know, nation building politically, which is in any state, bourgeois or socialist or whatever, you know.
Well, I think, okay, I'll explain the difference between me and you this way then. For me, my position is the materialist position. There's culture does not come from people's ideas, from people's deliberate decision making, or from social planning. It comes from a material and a real place which can't be discursively or rationally decided beforehand, and you can only on a rational level respond to it or try to give form to it. But its real source is more unconscious and more fundamental. And in this sense, it is also rural. A second thing I would say is that I think this question of culture, whether or not it's deliberate or unconscious, whether or not it comes from planning or it comes or it arises subjectively, I think it's already been settled actually, because in the Soviet Union, they dealt with a similar question of culture, because you had this proletariat movement, for example, and their goal was to establish a new proletarian culture, right? But the Stalinist tendencies in the USSR actually critiqued the proletariat and these movements for a new proletarian culture with the criticism that culture must always be national in form. It must always have a determinate form and a specific, determinate reality. So I think no matter how much you plan, no matter how much you try to institutionally create culture, what actually is at the root of it is always going to be something determinate and unconscious and material. And this is what's going to actually create the form of that culture and give context.
Okay, well,
to what that culture actually is.
Unconscious yet material at the same time. Like that's
because material is because think about it, like material is unconscious, because how can something unconsciously affect you? It means it's not something that you subjectively rationally think about. It's something that affects you even if you don't intentionally do it. For you to be affected by something unconsciously means that you are objectively affected by it, because even if you consciously try to go against it, it still happens, right? That's the meaning of objectivity. Despite the fact try to run it rationally, it still is inevitable. It's going to happen. It's unconscious on this kind of level.
So what you're saying is like there's this unconscious, like, you know, national like force that like expresses itself in different contexts, basically, and it's unconscious, so we can't like measure it or like or whatever, but it's just there.
What I'm saying is that let me just put it to you in the most basic way. Culture comes from material reality. Culture comes from determinate material reality. And because it comes from material reality, it is also unconscious, because it doesn't come from your conscious planning of reality. It's deeper and more foundational than what you consciously planned. You see what I'm trying to say here? It's unconscious precisely because it's material. You see what I'm getting at?
I mean, I kind of get it, but I just think it's like a weird way of framing it, honestly.
No, I'm just trying to say this. I'm trying to say this simple thing. Culture comes from material reality.
Material force. We're talking about some kind of entity or mechanism in nature, whether it be nature or society, or some kind of it's something that we can actually like identify and describe as like a real thing.
No, it is real. It's like the most real thing. So here's the problem with here's like kind of the philosophical problem with the way Americans think, and specifically the way American leftists think. For American leftists, their conception of what is real and what is not real is still based in British empiricism. So for them, real just means if you can see, touch, and feel something. But when I talk about the real, I mean the Lacanian real. I mean the Marxist real, which is not based in this tradition of empiricism, but actually has its roots in a sublation of German idealism, which started with Kant. And the revolution of Kant was that he discovered that what's actually the most fundamental and the most real is precisely what we can't see, taste, or feel. So it's actually it's actually the exact opposite of what you think is real.
Can I discuss Kant real quick with you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so have you read Materialism and Imperial Criticism by Lenin?
Yeah.
So if you read that book, it's not the best book, but I do like some of the arguments Lenin makes. And one of the arguments Lenin makes about Kant's whole thing about the noumena or whatever is, if there's supposedly this noumena that we can never actually know outside of like our ideas, yet at the same time like it supposedly exists, but if we can never actually know it like outside of our ideas, there's inherent like contradiction in Kant's idea. Like Lenin, I think like that kind of Kantian idealism, in my opinion, is not materialism.
No, you don't get it. I'm not saying you don't get why I'm bringing up Kant. The reason why I'm bringing up Kant is not because I'm saying that Kant is correct. It's because I'm saying that this fundamental distinction that Kant makes between the noumena and the phenomena is the basis for Marxism. Marx makes a similar distinction between appearance and essence. You can see that even in Capital, where he talks about, for example, the value as the value as like an essence, right, versus the expression of value and exchange value. This is the distinction I'm talking about. Now, as far as the Marxist critique of Kant goes, the Marxist critique of Kant is not that the unseen is not that Kant was wrong to say that the unseen is more real. Rather, Kant's flaw is that he has a idealistic conception of what the unseen actually is. Marxists actually go further than Kant and say that not only is the unseen more real, but it does not in itself have any form. It's indeterminate, right? The noumena is itself indeterminate. It's not a hidden form. Kant makes the error of leaving it open to being a hidden form, but for Marx, it's not a hidden form. It is material. The material, the object, is itself already indeterminate and unrealized. And the only way in which it becomes it takes expression, it becomes determinate, and so on, is through gaining form. And so this is the dialectic of content and form. The only way in which content gains reality is through form giving expression to content. But this does not change the fact that the content itself is not something of substance that you can touch and feel. This is an empiricist and also a substantialist problem. I reject both the substantialist position. I understand. Wait a second. Let me put it this way. I reject the substantialist position and I reject the Kantian position. But I reject the Kantian position through critiquing it, his insights in a deeper way.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I agree with you ultimately that like the whole Anglo-empiricist like idea that like something's only real if we can like touch it or and measure it or whatever directly, or if it's not something physical you can like physically observe, then it's not real. Because I mean, I think like obviously we think capitalism is like obviously a real thing, even though it's.
Let me give you a good example. Actually, let me give you a really good example. The Marxist notion of value, right? Value itself,
value, but it still is like a thing that exists.
Well, the only way, but the thing is, the only way in which you don't really measure value itself, you just measure it exchange value, right? Marx says that exchange value is the only way in which value gains expression, right? There's still this contradiction between the value, which is itself kind of indeterminate and not really like seeable and so on, and then exchange value, which actually gives a form and an expression to it. I'm just talking about this dialectic. And so when I speak of the material, I'm speaking of something kind of similar to value, right? The material is in itself indeterminate and so on, and not something you directly like get at and touch and see and so on. But then it gains expression through these cultural forms that you can interact with, that you can touch, and that you can experience more directly and so on. But this is the expression, I'm saying, of a more deeper material reality.
Right. Listen, I would say this, like, I'm not saying that nations aren't real things. They obviously are very real. Or it's, if they weren't real, the world would be a lot different. It's obvious, like, nations are like based in like, very much like real historical, like, traditions and real feelings of people's subjective consciousness, as well as, the whole legal superstructure and state power on top of that. I guess my argument would just be that, like, I don't think that there's the inner form of like the nation state is like found in the like rural masses exclusively, and that this is kind of rural culture is like basically the like inner form that's like expressed by the nation state. Like I just don't think that historically it's like holds up. If we actually take a look at like historical projects of nation building, like I think it's very much processes of that heavily involve like, you know, the urban bourgeoisie's desires to modernize rural people in a lot of cases, and rural people often like want to hold on to like local particularities against the broader idea of a nation. For example, the French Revolution, like you have all these you know, suppressions of the peasantry who want to maintain these kind of localist ties and don't want to be integrated into the project of like nation building. So I think
so I want to kind of clarify my position a bit. What I'm suggesting is not really nation building. It's more like civilization building, because the nation state itself was a modernist the nation state itself was a kind of modernist, progressive, etc. Kind of thing. Like, I mean, like you point out, it itself was a modernist thing. So what I'm talking about is kind of the sublation of the nation state with the revival of civilizations, which is a return to this kind of pre-nation state, pre-modern world, but in a new, in essence, is a return to that, but in a new form. And so this is what I'm talking about. And secondly, as far as culture arising from the rural masses, I think historically this is true, not even just on a cultural level, but I mean, where do cities come from, right? They came from the rural masses. Where did the proletariat came from? They came from the peasantry. All of this came from the peasantry, and through the process of modernization, the peasantry increasingly gave rise to cities and bigger cities, and eventually you have modern cities and modern industry and so on that arise. What you're actually talking about when you talk about the bourgeoisie's influence on culture, what you're talking about here is actually a form of negation. The bourgeois influences the cultural development through negating the very material premise of culture to begin with, through coming into contradiction with the countryside. But the communist position is neither the purely conservative position of the rural countryside, nor the negative progressive position of the bourgeoisie. The communist position is the negation of the negation. And so through taking this revolution and the forces of production even further and coming into contradiction with the bourgeoisie, you at the same time also return back into your civilization to begin with. It's actually through this revolution and the forces of production that you can revive civilization. If you look at the history of China, you have a very similar thing happens. It's actually through the negation of negation, through communism, that Chinese Confucian civilization was revived. I mean, Mao Zedong, right? He was a legalist, and his Cultural Revolution criticized not only the Soviet influences, but even traditional Chinese culture, right? But this negation, he only paved the way for a deeper reconciliation and a sublation, which would end up being the return of Confucian spirituality and Confucian rites and so on, in a much more advanced form, which would absorb the teachings and the wisdom of Mao Zedong thought, and which will have arrived out of this brutal pragmatism. What I'm suggesting for communists in America is something similar. We don't reject the objective transformations in the forces of production that are occurring. We take them even further, and through taking them even further, we reconstitute American civilization on a new basis.
I mean, listen, this is really where I think like the patriotic socialists or whatever, I know some people don't like that term, but I guess the civilizational socialist stuff just I think is just absolutely crazy, is like this whole idea that like communism is like a project of like reconstituting like ancient civilizations on like a higher modern form. Like, you know, I understand like you do have like the Marxist humanist types who like really emphasize how like communism is kind of like a return to primitive communism, but in like a new, you know, form, a higher form or whatever. But like just changing, like, you know, having like, you know, the Asiatic motor production or whatever be the original form really does like make it into this like absolutely like insane project to me of like trying to like reconstitute like ancient empires.
Well,
I
mean,
listen, like
I think objectively, whether or not you believe this is theoretically or ideologically correct, it's happening. I think it is happening because if you think about it, whereas communism actually arose first, right? It was in these post-Mongol gunpowder empires, Russia and China, and also it was rooted in a kind of continuation of the Asiatic mode of production. I mean, if you actually look at the writings of Stalin,
that's like a right wing like talking.
No, it's not. That's actually Stalin himself says this. Stalin himself says that Ivan the Terrible is comparable only to Lenin. Only Ivan the Terrible is comparable to Lenin. Even not just this, but Stalin was entirely theoretically correct and on a theoretical level. I can prove this to you because Ivan the Terrible did exactly what Stalin did. Ivan the Terrible mobilized the peasantry and the regular townsfolk against the local elites, against the local aristocrats. He created local democracies throughout Russia. He created local democracies throughout Russia, which completely outmoded the political power of the local elites. And he also did a collectivization. He also collectivized the land and took the land from the aristocrats of the time and nationalized them in the form of the Oprishchina. This is pretty much what Stalin does, and Stalin himself pays direct homage to him.
That's awesome, but
it's the truth. It's just objectively, historically true. You can say ideologically you don't like it, but it's true.
I think in my opinion that shows that like the USSR was kind of like, you know, starting to conceive itself as more of a Russian project rather than a Soviet project. The whole idea of the Soviet identity was to like overcome like, you know, Russian chauvinism. Like the Soviet Union was meant to be like initially under Soviet Union, like Russian nationalism was like weakened in favor of this idea of, you know, unity of different nations, like overcoming national division. Like,
you don't get it. Civilization, yeah, but the arrival of civilization. Wait a second though. Here's the thing though. Civilization states are multinational in character. They are multinational in character, and it is actually through the promotion of national cultures that a higher unity of these cultures, of these nations, is possible. Stalin himself writes about this. He writes about the flowering of national cultures, not just Russian national culture, but also, you know, Ukrainian national culture, Georgian national culture, etc. And through the flowering of all these national cultures that the sublation in the form of a higher civilization state is possible in the first place. And this was Stalin talking about Ivan the Terrible. It wasn't Khrushchev. It wasn't Gorbachev. It wasn't Brezhnev. It was Stalin. If at any point Russia was true to its communist core, it was under Stalin. Of Muscovy. The Stardom of Muscovy did not just represent Russians. The Stardom of Muscovy did not just represent Russians. I mean, Russia's always been a multinational civilization, historically speaking. I mean, where did Russia originate? It originated in Kiev. So when we speak of Russia, we're already speaking of something that's not purely national, but is multinational and civilizational. So I think you're making a very mute point here. This belief in the revival of civilizations is not nationalist. If anything, it's at the expense of nationalism. It's because it's a higher unity that sublates nationalism. And the Soviet Union, I think it could not complete this project, but it was a very important stage in the revival of Russian civilization. If we look at China, I think they were able to do this even more successfully. They were able to completely revive Confucian civilization. They were able to completely revive the China super identity, which supersedes and sublates national identities, not through destroying them, but through them, not as a liquidationist destruction of national identities, but through these particular national identities was a new Chinese super identity able to be created. China completely achieves this. I mean, China itself has had a return to Confucian civilization. If you read any Chinese theorist, any Communist Party of China theorist, you will see that there is a new trend of Confucianism within the Communist Party of China. And Xi Jinping himself is one of the people most associated with this new Confucian spiritual revolution in China. And this is not nationalist. This is clearly not nationalist because it encompasses many different nations. And this Confucian civilizational reality even encompasses like places like Korea in a higher, more civilizational sense. So when you speak of this being a retreat into nationalism, it cannot be more wrong. The premise of civilization is multinationalism.
Listen, like, I really kind of just wanted to talk about the land reform question for a little bit, so I ended up staying on here way longer than I was intending to. But so I'm gonna get going. It's good talking though. It was it was an interesting discussion, I will say that.
All right. Well, I think someone else wants to debate me. I'm gonna let them on. Hey.
No, I'm not here to debate.
Oh, yeah, I know not you. I thought there was someone else who asked for speakership. I tried to approve them. I think it's D apostrophe Nar. I think they wanted to debate me. I know they asked for a speakership earlier. Yeah, okay. Yeah, go ahead, speak. You can go ahead and speak if you want to debate me.
Yes. I actually got a question. There are currently a lot of left-wing parties across the country. Is it possible for the CPUSA and other left-wing parties to form an alliance?
I'm gonna be honest. Aside from the People's Party, I don't really see any of these left-wing parties as being of like much real value. If they, I really just want to build the Communist Party of the USA, and I think the People's Party is a party that we can unite with, because I think the People's Party is a party that has to some extent a popular basis and is trying to build a real populist basis. So I think we can ally with them. As far as the PCUSA goes, I think that the PCUSA should be allowed to join the Communist Party again and be reabsorbed into the Communist Party. From the kind of inside information I have, it seems like they've been dealt an unfair deal. So I would want to reabsorb them. Now DSA, I think DSA are going to be some of the biggest enemies of the Communist Party, because I think the contradiction in the 21st century is not between like capitalists and socialists. It's between socialists and other socialists, right? The ruling elite also function as socialists. They have this kind of green energy socialism. The green energy socialism of the DSA, which is culminated into support for the Azovite Nazis in Ukraine, I think will be among the biggest enemies of the CPUSA. So that's pretty much my response. We should ally with the People's Party, reconsolidate the PCUSA, and oppose the Democratic Socialist.
And as for the Party of Socialism, the Socialism and Liberation,
I'm honestly just not that interested in them. Like, if they're successful, all power to them. But I just don't. I don't know. I think they're pro-China, right? So that's a good thing. But just in general, I just don't think they're very relevant, and I just don't feel any way. I don't feel positive towards them. I'm just very much not interested. If they prove themselves to have good political leadership and are actually able to obtain success, then maybe so. But as of now, I just don't really have any real interest. If they want to support us, I'm not going to tell them not to, though. So there's that.
But what about the Greens? They mostly share art and share our interests.
I think the Green Party has a really bad aesthetic. It's a really bad name, but I definitely don't have any problem with working together with Green Party type people. I know in practice they tend to be kind of just kind of anti-establishment kind of people. So that's all right, I guess. But yeah, I don't really like the aesthetic. I wouldn't want to be too associated with the kind of the aesthetic of the Green Party. I kind of see the Green Party almost like I see the Libertarian Party, except I think the Libertarian Party has probably a better aesthetic, to be honest.
I consider the Libertarian Party as the Diet Coke of the Republican Party.
I don't know. I've met some Libertarian Party people who are pretty anti-establishment and pretty anti-war, and that's really the benchmark for me is whether or not they end up coalescing with an anti-imperialist tendencies. I have no real problem working together with the Libertarian Party. I'm not against working with the Green Party either. I just don't really like the aesthetic of the Green Party because it just has this kind of association where people are going to think green, environmentalism, degrowth, and like all this kind of stuff. But as far as the actual content of their positions, if they're against the establishment, then that's based. I will be charitable in supporting to any organization or tendency that's really against the establishment.
Yeah, but you were the line. You mentioned the People's Party. You say you will work with them despite the numerous problems that has been reported by them.
What problems?
The fact that there's been reported that they're basically removing volunteers. Not to mention the scandal going on with the leader of the People's Party, Nick Brana.
Yeah, so as far as removing volunteers, that's really just their business. I don't care if they remove volunteers. Maybe they had a really good reason for removing those volunteers. That's internal party politics. I have nothing to do with their internal party politics. I actually care about the concrete positions they're taking and what position they have in respect to the American establishment. I don't care whatsoever about the personal dramas of the people in the People's Party or about their internal politics. In fact, I think as far as purging volunteers goes, from what I've heard, they've actually purged a lot of the leftists in the People's Party. So I think I would cheer them on for purging some of those leftists, because what I've seen from the Bernie movement, and I used to be a Bernie guy in 2016, but what I learned from that is that it's really the leftists that ruin these like populist movements. It's always the leftists that ruin these populist movements. It was the leftists that ruined the Bernie movement. There was a time in which Bernie actually had a basis in a popular basis in America in 2016, and that was completely ruined by the DSA and all these different leftists and left-wing organizations that got associated with them, and also obviously by his own lack of political courage and his own concession to the establishment. But the leftists definitely did not make it any better. So I'm actually happy they're purging leftists. So good for them. Actually, that actually kind of makes me want to work with them even more.
But what's the difference between what we believe in and other leftists who believes in the same things that we that believe in the same things that we do? I mean,
I'll put it this way. Let me put it this way. Actually, let me just put it this way. I don't care that much about ideology. I just care about whether or not you're anti-establishment. If you're anti-establishment, if I think you actually pose a threat to the establishment, I'll support you whether you're left-wing, right-wing, centrist, whatever. If you are authentically expressing an anti-establishment and popular position, I will support you. I don't even think the People's Party are against. I think the People's Party itself is honestly, of anything, probably still a bit too left wing. It is. I mean, the People's Party came from the Bernie movement. So even though they purged leftists, what I'm really saying is that they purged the kind of anti-popular leftists. If there's a leftist who's anti-establishment and they want to work with us, I don't really care about ideology. For me, the main thing is to oppose the globalist American deep state. Whether you're a leftist who does that or a right winger who does that, I don't really care.
All right.
Well, all right then. I guess if that's all you had to ask, that's my position. I myself, I'm a communist, but like I said, I'll work together with right-wing, centrist, whatever groups, as long as they're anti-establishment, and we align on this more basic contradiction between the people and the rotten establishment. All right, I guess that's all you had to say. Oh yeah, I think I'm gonna. I think I forgot to check and see if Haas started his. Let me see if he started his stream yet. Looks like he hasn't. I just noticed that that Rev and Prism disappeared.
Yeah, I'm just gonna chill in here.
Did anything like start or happen, or I guess not. I guess there's not really a lot going on tonight. I was checking to see if Haas is streaming, but doesn't.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything.
He doesn't look like he is. So I guess I debated the people who wanted to debate. If there's anyone else who wants to debate, I'm here to debate. That's why I made this. People were attacking me over that tweet. So if people want to debate, they can debate me. Hey, Benign, what's up? Yo.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good down under. I was actually going to ask about something that was raised in the Patreon question.
Yeah, go ahead. I don't actually look at the Patreon question, so just like repeat the context for me, and I'll go about it.
It's just about like international sort of members, not members, but international kind of people associated with infrared. Kind of what you think is the best way to go for, because obviously we just support you guys or whatever, and because you're in the core, what you guys do affects us as well. We always say that the American president is kind of our head of state, effectively. You guys tell us to go to a war, we're going to war. So we have an investment in your politics, but we also want to develop our own kind of independent sort of movement or independent position. And that's kind of what I've been trying to do with the sort of Australian context, try to apply kind of infrared vision here. But what would you say, Henry, what advice would you give to international kind of observers of infrared who've taken kind of inspiration from you guys?
All right, what I would say is this. I do think there is a global contradiction internal to socialism. I think that's really kind of the hotbed of where your political energy should be focused. It's this contradiction that's internal to socialism. Even in China, you have like these kind of like liberal, like American leftist tendencies that exist among some segments. So really, I would say that one common thing I think that's across the board is to oppose these American cultural imports of American leftism, oppose it on a popular ground, on a more populist popular ground, and give a determinate expression to communism in your own context. So that's something I think I would say across the board. I know in Hispanic countries, I talked to Jorge, and there's the problem of American leftism and Hispanic countries. Like increasingly, there's this kind of contradiction. It's kind of like it's kind of the norm to be like a socialist or a leftist politically in a lot of those countries. But the question is, what kind of leftist, right? Are you? And so I think it's these issues internal to socialism that I think can be addressed on an international level. But it's really going to depend a lot on what country you're in. Unfortunately, I don't really know a lot about Australia. That's kind of a black spot for me. So I couldn't really give you specifically a lot of advice. But what I would say, just generally speaking, is you have to really kind of okay. So for Australia, unlike America, it's still formally in the Commonwealth, is still under the crown. But unlike Canada, I do think Australia has more unique kind of civilizational realities. I think in Australia, you really can embark on a process, a kind of what Dugan calls an ethnogenesis process of creating a new Australian ethnos civilization. So I think for an Australian, it would be to kind of discover what is the basis of, what is the common basis that ties together the Australian people. In America, I would say it's like the Constitution, maybe even religion to an extent. So it would be to discover what is that common basis that actually unites Australians as a people, and give some kind of real explicit expression to this on Republican grounds against the influences of the British Crown and against the influences of America, because we live in Australia is under the influence of the American empire. So I think you have to try to wage a popular anti-American, anti-British, anti-globalist Republican movement that also seeks to discover what is common amongst the Australian people.
Yeah, that's kind of the conclusion I came to as well. One thing that is a bit of a contradiction, though, is there's always been a kind of, because we're Anglosphere countries, I kind of see the history as, it's like there's a positive side to our kind of shared sort of history as well. Like the Australian labour movement, we spell it, we don't spell it with the British labour, with the U, we spell it with the American O. And there's a reason why, because our history of the labour movement was deeply tied up with the American one. I believe with the, what are they called? Like the earliest labour movement in America, I forget what it's called, the Knights of Labour, and that's what it was called. So there's a long history of movements, and even like the influence of like 1776 on the sort of democratic kind of, obviously with the Chartists as well in Britain. There's a lot of like, what I'm trying to say is that like, it's kind of hard to square the circle, because there is a kind of like elitist anti-Americanism that exists here that kind of is, it's kind of Anglophilic in a way. Like, if I'm trying to explain it right, like
I think I know what you're talking about, because I've noticed this. I don't really know that many Australians, but I've noticed this with Europeans, where sometimes the anti-Americanism is not like from a popular or anti-imperialist standpoint. It's from a more liberal elitist standpoint. I've definitely seen that, so I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big problem because like it means that the vacuum of anti-Americanism is sort of taken up by effectively. It kind of makes us more imprisoned in a way because America also has a revolutionary history that we should like draw from as well because we've never had a revolution on this continent. We've had rebellions, we've had that kind of stuff, but we've never had a revolution, and that is something that really sets us apart. Because I guess Canada's also never had one as well, but it's we're in this kind of weird situation where we want to draw from the positive history of America while at the same time. That's why I think there's like during the anti-mandate protest, for example, down here, a lot of people were waving like Trump flags and like libertarian American flags, and people would scoff at that. But when I saw that, I kind of understood it. I understood why people were like instinctively being drawn to those sort of like libertarian symbols here. We don't have a voice for it here. Here, there's like we have Eureka, we have some history, but I think there's a reason why in those sort of freedom movement there's an association between sort of America and our own local history. So what I'm trying to say is that like the Anglosphere have to kind of like we have a kind of shared curse as well, so to speak, and we have to sort of like I talked to Urban Maoism about this actually a while ago about the necessity of like a shadow AUKUS of like of all the Anglosphere countries having kind of like some level because we share a language. We're going to be tied up in a lot of ways. Our internet's going to be tied up in a lot of ways. So you have to kind of think about it in terms of like a transnational sort of like resistance movement, but it's all kind of free floating at the moment. Like it's not anything real at the moment, but, and I'm sorry, I'm from all over the place, but I'm just throwing out some concepts. I wanted to see what you think about what I said. So.
Yeah, I would agree with you in using like kind of America's revolutionary and legacy, and also like history of like workers movements and so on as a associating with that. I can completely agree with that. When I mentioned anti-American, what I really meant was I guess specifically what I mean is anti-globalist, right? And I think that these same kind of MAGA Trump people, libertarians, are also united against that same globalist institution. And it's really about uniting all these forces, like within our own country, and also like as you said, transnationally, against the globalist world order. But I think it can be something really, really powerful. It's almost like how when the truckers convoy started in Canada, that also kickstarted something in America, right? So we are connected in this kind of way, and even after multipolarity, we will still be connected because as you said, we share the same language, and we also have to some extent a common history. It's really a complicated. It's a very complicated question, though. I do think that because I'm not really that familiar with Australia, it's hard for me to really say personally my position. But if the anti-Americanism is really associated with this kind of elitism, this kind of almost like English elitism, then yeah, I would definitely combat that with America's revolutionary legacy, because I see that same kind of anti-Americanism across Europe as well, where it won't be like anti-Americanism because they're like anti-NATO. It'll be anti-Americanism because like, oh man, look at this stupid Trump guy. Look at these stupid, conservative Americans. It'll be kind of like a liberal elitism. So the real question is not, I guess the real question is not so much whether you're pro-America or anti-America. It's which America are you talking about, right? Are you talking about America as a globalist empire? Are you talking about the universal America, or are you talking about the determinate real America? And it's like wielding that. It's a move. I think movements. So definitely in America, our movement is based upon that contradiction, but also in the Anglosphere in general, I think that also has some truth to it. Also, I remember just from like some like conversations between Urban Mao and Haas in the past, there's something he would always say about England and America, which is that America is like better off when it's more separate from England, and England is better off when it's more separate from America. And so there is, I think there really is this kind of like foundational contradiction between England and its kind of offspring countries that has to be resolved. because even in America, even as an American, right, to oppose the globalist American empire, you have to oppose the English influence on it, which is it's directly tied up with it. And I think now, as American unipolarity is starting to fade away, I think we're seeing the last death throes of the American empire will be an attempt to revive the British Empire. So yeah, anti-Anglo, pro-America revolutionary legacy, I think is definitely a kind of a good line to take. Actually, I gotta end the space now though. I need to get some sleep. I actually have to wake up pretty early tomorrow, but it's been a good talk, and I'm down to talk anytime you want, Benign, either in the server or on Twitter, anywhere. And also, if you ever want to send me any information, like on Australia, or if you have any writings on Australia, I'll always be open to taking a look into that, because I'm not super familiar with Australia, unfortunately.
That's cool. I appreciate the talk. All
right. Well, later, guys. I think I did a good job debating that one guy. Unfortunately, we didn't get anyone who was too excited coming in, but I think I demonstrated the superiority of Infrared's position. And as a beautiful quote from Haas, I achieved the psychological projection of power. Anyway, later, guys.